You all. Thank you, Council President. Good morning.
Good morning.
Theo Pace, Staff Director for the City Council. You want to come on up for us? Municipal Clerk. Thank you all for coming out this morning. Just some housekeeping issues. The bathroom, if you go out to the right, you'll see a sign to the left. The Wi-Fi login is up here on the wall for your information. And here this morning with us from the Atlanta Community Food Bank, we have Laura Waits, the Director of Government Affairs, is going to come give the welcome.
Thank you.
Yay!
We're so happy you're here. I am not going to take a lot of your time, but just really want to say how honored we are to have each of you with us today, both at the big table up front and also all around. As a resident of District 6, I certainly appreciate all the work that you guys do each and every day. And then as a resident in the food bank situation over here on the west side, we are particularly grateful for your time. I wanted to take 1 minute to just call your attention to the resources we can offer and are always eager to offer to you all. You have at your places what we call our hunger map. We work with our national organization Feeding America to break down to the census tract level estimates of food insecurity. Obviously, food insecurity can be a proxy for a lot of other things related to poverty, but in particular, what that means to us is people who do not always know where their next meal is coming from. We, as food banks, are able to provide only one meal for every 12 meals, though, that is provided through the SNAP program. That means that we understand fully our partnership with government at every level. Our policy priorities tend to be at the state and federal level, so that's why you haven't seen me in your face lobbying or advocating. But we get points with Feeding America when you all speak up with us, and we count you guys in our category as grass tops. Did you know that you're grass tops?
No.
So you are now
Grass tops get cut though.
well, not and they keep growing.
Okay.
At least in my yard.
Okay.
And so we just want to express our appreciation. I put some of our materials over here because they may or may not be directly relevant to you and your work today, but they are by the coffee, so I know they'll get frequent visits. And just rest assured we're here to help you. Last but not least, we hope to be good citizens, and we work actively to engage our staff in voter registration to make sure that they are voting, and we've been promoting early voting in case you can't tell from these buttons all over my neck. So on the honor system, anyone in this room who wants to claim that you voted early, I would be more than happy to give you one of our little badges today as well. Can I see a show of hands? All right, thank you. I'll get around to you, and that is my welcome. We're glad you're here. All right, and you know, you have till Friday, so it's not, no shame if you haven't gotten there yet. All right. All right. Who else? Theo, that's me. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you. Ready? Sure.
What we're going to do is, we're going to take a break till 9:15, and then we'll begin the committee reports for Committee on Council and the Finance Executive Committee.
So I was going to start with an update on the significant legislation that's come out of Committee on Council so far this year. We had about 6 or 8 items. The first one was 1802-1259 that amended the City Council President's budget, and that is what allowed us to use the unused rollover funds for the parliamentarian. And I'm going to assume, Felicia, are you going to discuss the parliamentarian later? Okay. We have been doing an update on the rules on council, which was 1801, and went through and made sure that our rules were in line with our code on what the purview of all of our standing committees are. So that has been done. We, as you all remember, we amended our dates for council recess to align them with the Atlanta Public School System calendar. That was 1802-1278. We amended the base charter to clarify that the process for terminating bases is not automatic, but includes notification to the mayor, the council president, and council from the municipal clerk. And we also added a new section that dealt with quorums for base, and that the quorum can be established based on the actual number of filled seats, not the total number of seats, because we had several committees that always had vacancies, and therefore, so there might be 15 members on the committee, but only 10 seats were filled, and so they were repeatedly not being able to make quorum. So that week passed earlier this year.
Can you go back to that? I don't remember that. It was based on, what are we talking about, commissions or?
Yeah, committees, it could be anything. It could be the tree committee, it could be the bicycle commission. Those appointments, we changed the default language now is that quorum is based on the filled seats, not the total seats, and not the actual legislative number of seats.
Okay.
Just because we had several that people were saying
They couldn't get a quorum.
they couldn't get a quorum and people would show up. And so the committees themselves, I believe, can override that and say what they want quorum to constitute, but the default is it is a majority of the filled seats.
Okay.
We amended the code and the charter to increase the annual appropriations for council budgets for salaries and benefits up to $195,973. That was adopted at the end of the summer. We expanded our ethics jurisdiction. We had legislation that expanded the Board of Ethics jurisdiction to include contractors. That was adopted at the end of the summer. As you all probably remember, we passed the two pieces of legislation about lobbyists that were a dual referred to the Committee on Council and FEC, and we adopted that in September. So those were the significant pieces of legislation that came out of committee. Other work that we've been doing, we made a recommendation to appoint both a new council director and municipal clerk, and I think that's all going smoothly with Theo and Forrest.
Yay. It's too early to tell. It's too early to tell.
We'll give him a yay now. We'll give him a boo later.
And we have, we made council appointments to base to provide a recommendation to approve. Let's see. So the appointments that came out were 3 to the Public Schools Joint Committee, 1 to the Atlanta Citizens Review Board, 1 to the Women in Entrepreneurship Initiative Board of Directors, 2 to the Invest Atlanta Board of Directors, 2 to the Audit Committee. There's 1 more appointee who's a CPA that's still pending, and 1 to the Fulton County Board of Health. But those were appointments that are the whole council making an appointment. And we have provided a recommendation to sunset the task force to determine an appropriate manner in which to honor Congressman John Lewis and the Renew Atlanta Public Arts Advisory Group as they had completed their work and met their intended goals. So that's what we've gotten done so far this year. Items that I have on here to be discussed, and I don't know, Felicia, if you want me to run through, if we want to discuss them one at a time, or
Yes.
let everybody know what's on here and then.
Well, everybody has the
Okay.
agenda, so let's just hit the first one. Let's go.
Okay, so the first one came up, unfortunately, in the context of Ivory, about what do our rules say and what does the State Open Meetings Act allow or require about being able to vote when you're not present. And we had a legal opinion from the law department that said that the Open Meetings Act, in certain circumstances, does allow remote voting. And then there was some uncertainty or difference of opinions about does it require it, or do the, what do the rules of our body say? So it didn't, Ivory decided not to exercise the option to vote remotely, but since it has now come up, we thought that was a good topic for discussion of, do we want to be explicit in our rules to allow remote voting in situations that are permitted under the State Open Meetings Act?
And those are.
And so I'd just like to add on that,
issue, because we did get the code section from the law department, and I think, you know, you can interpret it to agree with that, but when I did some research on that particular code section, it was somewhere when the city, it was put in there somewhere when the city got established up to at least 1996, I think, when they did the charter amendment. So it did not contemplate remote voting. And I believe that the way that they worded it, they talked about whether you were present, whether you excused yourself for the meeting, et cetera, and it doesn't mean that. So the question I think the council has to deal with, because I know how I was, as the president was going to rule on it, which I was going to say that it's not something that we can do, and you all would have had to either decide to overrule me or whatever. But if that is something the council wants to contemplate, then I think it's a lot of discussion that people need to have, because while the state law is general and it allows people to vote remotely if they're out of the jurisdiction, or if
It's
they're-
up to 2 times in a year if they are out of the jurisdiction. So for us, that just means out of the city of Atlanta. Or if they have an illness or are physically unable to come. And it is, you can exceed that 2 per year limit if a doctor writes a letter saying that you are physically unable to be present.
So is that 2 per year for the whole council or per person?
Per person,
Per person?
per member. Is that
Per member.
right, Krista? Yeah.
Per member, so.
So that is as wide as the state would allow us to go, is to say 2 per year if you're out of the jurisdiction, or otherwise, does it say for illness, or is it
It says for medical, I think it's.
Medical?
Medical condition.
medical condition? So with no doctor's note, 2 per person per year for those reasons, and if there's a doctor's note for a medical reason, it could be exceed 2.
And, I mean, all of that has questions.
Yeah.
You know, because you could be in East Point, that's out of the jurisdiction, and vote remotely. Or you could have a medical condition, but then the doctor give you a note, but depending on how controversial of the issue that may be, somebody might challenge, well, what kind of medication you on? Or are you, you know, mentally safe? So anyway, right now, we are where we are. And
I think it's better to decide it not in a crisis moment, but in.
Right, so if
And what was
that,
the position you was gonna take again?
well, my position is that we haven't dealt with it in our code to make it clear, because I think based on the state law, we can adopt it, that's something that we can do. We may add a little to it to be clear about the process by which you do it, but I know we can't change the state law, but I think that this council, if you want to do it, needs to affirmatively do something legislatively to make it clear.
And Kristen,
Otherwise, y'all gonna bump heads with my interpretation.
remind me, the non-present members get counted towards quorum or do not get counted towards quorum?
Do not. Yes, the membership is the quorum. It's the membership.
So in this particular, normally, when you're allowed to have people participate by phone in a meeting, under any circumstances, as long as there's a physical quorum present in the room. So that's a
Yeah.
that's a different aspect
Yeah.
of it. Under this particular code section, it says, it's not clear.
Okay.
It just says that they're allowed to basically
Yeah.
participate as normal in the meeting.
Yeah.
So one could argue that they do count towards the quorum.
Yeah.
But that's not addressed specifically in that particular paragraph.
So-
One thing that I do just want to make sure that I put out there is that there is a school of thought on that, to this particular provision in the Open Meetings Act, that it's at the discretion of the member and not at the discretion of the body. So that it's a requirement as
Well,
opposed to
that was an
option.
opinion we got from you all, and
Right,
and
so I just want to make sure that
the
everybody's
council
clear.
can decide if they agree with that legal advice or not. I still just think it is much better to make this kind of decision not for a particular person, not in a particular circumstance, not in an emotional situation, but to decide if that's the way we want our body to operate or not. And the state law would allow it if we decided we wanted to do that.
what are other cities doing? Do you have any information about how other places have handled this? Obviously, technology has changed a lot, and so, you can participate remotely.
We can ask that and get that. I don't think, did you all look, Theo, and there were,
I think we did look at other cities.
Can't hear you, Theo.
We did look at a couple other cities. They were out of the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
And within the state of Georgia, it had very.
I mean, I know when I discussed it with some of the Fulton County commissioners, because we had gotten an opinion that said it's the right of the member, not, and the rules don't have to allow it. The Fulton County Board of Commissioners were like, oh, no way, our rules don't allow it, you have to be there, we have to. So I think that, I felt like the view that we got, that the Open Meetings Act says that every, entity in Georgia that's falls under the Open Meetings Act has to allow this. I didn't agree with, but I just think, again, it would be cleaner for us to make a decision of what we want our rules to be. But we can do
takeaway is more
we can do a
research.
survey. We can do some more research on what other entities that fall under the Open Meetings Act in Georgia have done since the amendment 2 or 3 years ago that addressed this issue of being out for medical purposes. Because under the Opens Meeting Act, it could be that you're out for an extended period of time. It could be all the meetings in a year that you are out for. So I'll provide some more. We'll get staff to look at that some more, see what other cities, counties, other bodies are doing, and do that. But I think it's something we should go ahead and address and not wait until the next time it comes up in a particular situation where I just think it makes it cloudier that way.
Let's go to the next one.
The next
Before you
one.
do that, I want to say something.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think we ought to discuss this because a term ago I had eye surgeries and I came back a lot sooner than I should have because I had those surgeries.
Yeah.
And if I had known that I could vote remotely, I would have voted remotely.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if we can exceed what's in the state law, but as a matter of preference, I think it should be left to the member. And I just wanted to put that on the record. I don't think the body ought to dictate people's medical conditions because I, as a member, felt compelled to come back because I didn't want to miss any meetings, then have an article written about me in the paper saying I missed X amount of meetings because of my physical condition. So I hope that we will consider that as we move forward.
And I do think that is, when I talked to the Attorney General, a former Attorney General about this, that is what the General Assembly had in mind, is when people had a medical something come up, an illness, an accident, something, and we're going to be out for an extended period of time, and it really was for particularly smaller bodies that. But anyway, that was what they were intending to do when somebody is cognitively and able to participate, but for medical reasons, could not be there, and that they wanted to allow that. So I will provide more research on that. We have a held piece of legislation that's 18-0-1416 that is about video recording of committee briefings. There was some requests by the public that briefings be done in a manner that allows them to be broadcast and or recorded. There are some logistical questions. I think there are logistical questions there that not every room has the capacity to have the videotaping done, so we might either need additional equipment or staff or resources to do that, or we might need to rearrange rooms. You have scheduling issues there. And then I think there's the question of, do we believe those are meetings that are, need to be recorded and, have a record of them that way. So that has been on our held, on the agenda on the held section for a while. And then I think other people have raised the issue of, do we even need to have briefings? So I don't know what the people's thoughts are
Well, I mean, it used to be a point where briefings, was not open to the public. Then we opened them to the public, which I fully support. And I think at some point, now that they're open to the public, people can come in and listen to anything we have to say. So the meat of our committee meetings are, in essence, what is happening on the committee. So for me, I just think that's another step that I think is really, we got to reorder our whole office area just to have them to do that. I just, personally, I don't think that's necessary. That's just my opinion. I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah.
Let me, I think it's good to have some history. And I guess I'm history since I've been around, even before I was a council member. So what happened with the briefings, they started off as briefings for the chairman of that committee to sit down with the administration and other people to ferret out what's on the agenda, what's ready, etc. And so that went on for a while. Then as administration councils changed, some council members started attending those meetings. And at that time, the council was not allowing the public to come in the meetings. Now, I would let people come in my meetings, but other chairs may not because it wasn't quote unquote a public meeting. But as time went on, we evolved and we decided that it was an open meeting. And so we changed the rules, and Ms. Stenius was around then too, to make sure that they were open, they were advertised as a regular meeting, because the fact was, you never knew how many council people were gonna show up. And there could be a quorum, and that could have dinged it into an open meetings and we would have been in violation. So they're now open to the public, so anyone who wishes they can to come, they're properly announced, they're put on our meeting sheets and people can attend. So I just want you to know it sort of has evolved over time because it's gone from what used to be a committee chair's briefing for the one person to talk to everybody to a full briefing for the whole committee and the council. So the question is now, do you move it to the next level and then have the requirement of it being videotaped and everything? So
Yeah.
we're going to use those cards. Carla, remind us so we'll know who wants to speak. Carla.
Oh, that's cute.
Yes, Carla.
I remember that. Good, good. So put
Marta
your
is
card
smarter.
up if you want to speak.
Smarter is smarter. That's why you.
I do it every day. I'm a little
Okay.
embarrassed, but I do it. I don't know why. I mean, I think we should, I'm just gonna say, I think we should leave it up to the chair because briefings, we do why are we doing the work of the committee prior to the actual committee? So like you said, and I remember I was part of the problem because when I first got on council, I wanted to go to the briefings because I wanted to learn. So I was one of those eager people that would go, and then C.T. Martin and I had a huge argument one day because he was there, and I felt like he was smarter than me because he'd been on council for a long time, and I was in the briefing, and we constituted a quorum, and I was like, C.T., please let me, the newbie, stay for the briefing, and we had an argument, and so then that was one of the impetuses that started us saying, oh, it's a quorum, so they're open meetings. So, but really, you're going over the information that you're gonna go over in the committee anyway. So why are we having a committee meeting prior to the committee meeting? And now, that's not to say that when I was first here, that I didn't want to do them. So I understand, especially for new people, why you would want to do it. But for some of us, especially with zoning, because with zoning, we read it, we do it, it goes to all, it has such a long process. I think that, just for me, I think the chair should be able to decide whether or not we have a briefing. Because if you'll remember, we used to not even announce briefings in the listing. So we just had the committee meetings, we didn't have the briefings, even listed on the sheets that are open to the, that we advertise.
And don't forget in this discussion, the question is, even if you do have the briefing, the videotaping piece is what we're
Yeah,
trying to
that's
get to.
what the
Mr. Bond was
I've
next.
gone out to, why do we even have them?
Okay.
If it's gonna be a hassle to record them, and it's gonna cost us more money, and it's gonna be all these things, because really, all you're doing is just a briefing of what you're fixing to walk into.
Michael?
Yeah, I think I don't think we ought to have briefings at all, because I think they've become de facto committee meetings. And I think that's why there was pressure to make them public, and also now pressure to have them recorded. Because you're basically having the meeting before the meeting. So you're having a public policy discussion, or you could, you're airing to have a public policy discussion prior to the real public policy discussion. And so if you're gonna have a briefing, it ought to be recorded. And it doesn't take much to set up a camera. We're doing it right now in a room. It doesn't take anything to record a meeting. It's nothing. You know, there's plenty we could do it on a phone. So, I mean, the excuse that we don't have a camera to record the meeting or a setup, it's not an excuse, okay? That's ridiculous, all right? So if you're gonna have it recorded, I think it ought to be up to the chair to decide if they wanna do a briefing or not. When I was public safety chair, I didn't have briefings, and the committee ran just fine. There wasn't any shock or surprise for members on the agenda or the administration. I had, back then it was Bernard Thomas who was the analyst, and whatever, if there was a big piece of legislation that the administration wanted, myself and the vice chair sat down with those couple of people. We went over the agenda so I wouldn't look foolish when the meeting started, and I knew what I was talking about. And then we went in there and ran the meeting, and that was it. But now the briefing is just a pretend committee meeting, away from the public. I mean, that's all it's become now, you know? And Felicia was right, back in the day, you had the briefing just to make so the chair would know what they were talking about. So if you're gonna have it, record it. You know, it's simple to do. And, you know, let's get over it and move on.
Howard?
Well, there was an intermediate stage where some of the briefings turned into dress rehearsals. Claire's CU briefings.
Not a briefing.
Hours.
Yeah.
Each thing on the agenda was discussed and debated. Now, the only good thing about that was, because the media wasn't there and the public wasn't there, you used to occasionally get answers to, why was this screwed up? When I chaired the finance committee, the rule was what is said in briefing stays in briefing. So you actually had people say, yeah, here's what happened. You're never going to get that in a committee meeting, ever. Now you got to drag a commissioner in behind a closed door, and maybe you'll get something out of them. So all that went away. Now the briefings are, finance briefing is 18-0-1111. We're going to do something with departments of widgets. Any questions? Next item. Any questions? Next item. Any? The only utility is you find out what you need a substitute for. Someone will say, oh, we're going to hold that. You may find out what walk-ins are coming. I mean, if you wanted to devise content that's utterly devoid of content, just let people watch it. But I mean, nothing happens. Carnally, nothing happens in our briefings. You know that better than anybody.
And you can come and record just like you're doing right now.
Oops.
All right, Joyce?
Just saying.
Well, I haven't chaired in a while, but when I chaired, it was very helpful for me. It prepped me as a chairperson to not be on the floor and there's confusion, and even for the legislative staff support, it helps them in terms of, we can look on the front end to make sure that we don't get out there, because some meetings go a long time. CDHS goes a long time. Sometimes city utilities goes a long time. And so to me, prepping on the front end helps the chair to look at anything's coming that we can try to make sure that it's gonna run smoothly. It is not, is to ask questions. If we have not gone through everything, literally gone through everything, the departments are sitting there, when you say, I'm confused about this legislation. I mean, we could do that on the floor, that's very true, but our committee meetings would go a lot longer. So, in terms of getting clarity, that to me was the purpose of a briefing, to make sure that we get clarity on everything and move forward, that our meetings go smoothly, but that's just my opinion.
Dustin?
Yeah, so just as a new council member who is a committee chair, I've always thought that briefings are rather useless. I find that you're just going in there and reading your agenda, and I mean, if I have a question or have a problem with something, I can always pick up the phone and call Julia. If I need to talk to Amir about any of the legislation that he has sponsored. Touche. I can pick up the phone and call him. Or I can call the administration. I mean, other than that, I mean, I just find that it's very useless, for lack of a better term, so.
JP?
So, we all have different opinions. I have the opposite opinion. As a new chair, I found it pretty helpful for me, Joyce, to your point, just to try to get organized and make sure I know who's presenting, who's covering this, all these sorts of things. So I'm fine with it being videotaped. I mean, to Michael's point, just open camera and be done with it. So, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, on Committee on Council, the only point of the briefing is for me and for Julia and I to figure out how to pronounce people's names who are coming in to be appointed to a committee or a commission, or for me to say, oh my God, has Matt still not appointed somebody to name somebody to this? Do I need to chase him down and do that? And we could sit in my office and do that. There is some.
No, you can't sit in your office and do that. And you're behind closed doors.
You know what? The Open Meetings
But
Act
she's
does
one
not
person.
prohibit me and Julia from sitting in my office and doing that. And the law department don't tell me, and Matthew don't tell me that I can't talk to anybody without it applying.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say is, I find it very useful. I can't believe that all of these people, when I look and there's 20 people in the meeting, that it's a good use of their time, frankly. So it could be with a lot less people. Maybe I need to do a better job of clarifying what it is.
Like, you don't need to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, you all don't need to be here. So.
Theo, what, I know that there was some estimate of what the cost may be annually for,
So the committee room 2 is already hardwired.
Okay.
For camera. The camera that we use in committee room 1, which would be the same thing we install, costs about $8,000. There is the issue with the staffing. There's one camera person, Dexter Andrews, with the council communications staff, and 2 for Channel 26.
And
so we actually
difficult.
We actually alternate a lot of days. Dexter's in the booth recording the meetings. So there's a logistical issue as far as if he's in the control room and the 2 cameramen for Channel 26 for the mayor's office are off-site at an event, who's going to record the committee briefings for those times that the briefings conflict with the meetings?
yeah, so there is a little bit of there's an expense issue and there's a logistics issue on if it is going to be broadcast on 26, like other meetings, it is going to cause some rearranging of times and rooms and all of that.
I think, yeah.
Yes.
So I was gonna say, I hear 2 things. One is whether or not we need to have the briefings, and then 2 is the policy issue that if we do have a briefing, should it be taped? So I think when I was gonna talk about this, getting to the end of the year, we will be having appointments for committees the next year. I think each chair probably would need to determine before we post the listing of the meetings and the times, whether that chair chooses to have a briefing or not. So those who don't have briefings, it won't apply to, but still you need to deal with the policy issue, is if a chair decides that they want to have the briefings as we've had them, should they have them taped? And that might be better because we're limiting to only a few, because a lot of you said, I'm hearing you say, it's not even worth having the briefing, so that's one less meeting. So I think that's kind of where we are on that, is let's see where we are next year, how many people want to have it, but then the legislation before you, that's the issue. Do you want to have them videotape? And then, so that's what's going to be before you.
Yeah, so I think it probably would be good to pull this legislation off of held and hear it sooner than later before we roll into the next year, because people, so that we know which way we're gonna go, and we know, so we can make room assignments and resources and all of that, for the new committees in January.
So if we can go to the next topic.
Okay, so the next topic is going to be 18-0-1587, which is a piece of legislation that would amend Section 2-136 to allow public comment at the start of meetings. So our
Committee meetings.
Committee meetings. Our code section on remarks by the public only specifies that the chair has to allow at least 1 minute of public comment. Otherwise, it can be conducted however the chair wants to be. Currently, all of our committees allow public comment before and after on legislative items, with the exception of zoning, which only allows for public comment at the beginning. So,
And I think that the impetus about it, and if I'm wrong, I don't know who introduced it, is to get some uniformity amongst committees about how public comment is handled, and to ensure that the public has the first opportunity to speak before the agenda.
I don't know if anybody has thoughts on.
got a room.
Oh, yes, you do. Natalie.
So Howard, at Finance, you said yesterday, and you're just coming in, we're talking about public comment.
Yeah.
And you said we only allow public comment where? For
At the
Finance?
beginning, as printed on the agenda.
Okay. So Jennifer just said all the committees do it before and after, so.
That's what my notes said.
You said, you said before and after, is that what we voted on, or is
No,
that?
some
It's just the
people,
practice.
some people
Yeah,
do it
it's not-
before.
It's not
and-
required, but that I believed was the practice, but it's not for finance and it's not for zoning.
No, and the other thing I would say is the intent with the before the meeting, at least the 1 minute or whatever is allowed per committee, is because the agenda will then be something that the
Yep.
public can speak to and inform possibly
Yep.
the position of the council members.
Michael?
I think you ought to leave it to the discretion of the chair. If every committee runs exactly the same, then why have a chair of that committee? Just have somebody rotate the chair of the meeting every time it's different.
That's interesting.
I mean, I think, and then of course that makes all the committees boring if they're all the same. They all run the same. It makes them less interesting. So I think it ought to be left to the discretion of the chair. So other than that, if you take all the authority of what the chair can do away, it's like, why be a chair? Why aspire to it? We'll just take turns, like, what's that game? When people sit down?
Musical
Musical
chairs
chairs, right. We just change chair every minute.
or Russian roulette.
That's better. I like that.
Where's the tree?
Oh, okay.
I like it to be at the discretion of the chair, which means that also at the discretion of those committee members, because the committee members would then tell the chair, well, Mr. Chair or Mrs. Chair, I'd like to hear from the community at this time, or the public,
Yeah.
that can always come up. If it's a hot button issue, the committee members can say, well, I think this is a topic we want to hear before we vote, or we want to hear it twice, or what have you. I also wanted to kind of understand that, is there, like in full council, you're not supposed to be able to get on the speaker's agenda after a certain time. And I'm
Exactly.
noticing in committee, people are.
There's no cutoff time in committee
There's no cutoff time in committee.
in terms of signing.
Is there a coded cutoff time for council?
Yes, the council meeting sign-up sheet ends when the council meeting starts, and that's in the code.
Okay.
Committees don't have that, so people may not be there at the very beginning of the meeting, and then they come and sign up.
But that would be up to the chair to decide whether to allow it or not?
At this point, the chair, of course, whatever the chair or the president does is always subject to overriding by the body or the committee.
What I've seen lately is a list starts with 4 names at the beginning of the meeting, or 5 names, and then somebody hears a good point from that person, so now they want to speak on it, and it grows to 10 names, and it's, you know, it's easier to gauge what's going on when you already have the names there than, you know, this list is growing and people trying to, you know, give out time as though it's the full council, you know, so.
And that's something new, because typically in the committee, people who signed up didn't do, when I chaired, I wouldn't, and we didn't, I mean, very rarely the people would ask, did we do this yielded time in committee? It usually was just at the council.
Okay.
And we have rules related to how you go about doing that. So if you're doing that in committee, it's because the chair, and that's some of the discretion that the chair has on how to best facilitate the meeting. And I know we've gone through this historically back and forth, you know, people wanting to make sure they had voices, but we also wanted to make sure the chairs had a discretion to run the meeting. Again, always subject to objection from the committee.
So I prefer having public comment at the start of the meeting, because I want to hear about, you know, before the vote, but I don't think it has to be twice. If the chair wants it to be just
This
at the
legislation
beginning.
only says in the beginning,
This,
right?
this was your legislation, right?
Right.
It was to allow for it at the start,
At least at that point.
at least 1 minute at the start of the meeting.
And if
And
you
it would be
wanted to do it at the
codified.
end, you could do it
That's
at the
right.
end, but she just want to make sure that every committee had it at the beginning.
Okay.
Okay.
And I agree with that.
Anybody else have thoughts on, oh,
That's
Joyce.
why I was asking, so that was your legislation, that says public comment at the beginning. And if they come in the middle, so.
That's the discretion piece that Mr. Vaughn was saying would be lost, really isn't at jeopardy at all here, because you can always say, and let's do something else. But at a minimum, codification would be that the 1 minute is at least before every committee meeting. There would be public at least 1 minute, and so then there again, discretion kicks in because it could be more. But it's
Right.
not gonna be less.
Because and what I see happen on some of the committees I'm on, which is, I guess it's all right. I mean, when I was chairing, it was like at the discretion of the committee, and every committee member, if I remember, actually the committee voted on specifically, not just the chair, but the committee,
That's
the chair made
exactly right.
recommendations, and the committee said, I agree with that. So it wasn't
right.
just at the discretion of the chair.
Mhm.
It was the committee that says, here we are, first of the year, here is what's gonna happen in terms of this. Do we agree, we disagree, it's discussed on the floor, we take a vote on it, and that's how it's done. And so, but and what I do see is, it's becoming interesting that we're having folks, some people just wanna come and talk.
Mm.
And sometimes, I've seen so many times, it's like, I've even heard Ms. Moore and Ms. Hartman says, and there was something else that talked about speaking to the legislation that's before us, as opposed to just coming and saying anything, you know, are you speaking to, and sometimes people come and speak about stuff that should be in another committee.
Yeah, and that can happen just as for other people. When I chaired committee on council, I kept directing people, make sure that you're talking about things that are purview to the committee on council, because otherwise it'd have been a catch-all for public comment for the council meeting.
Right, and that's, I see that happening a lot, because some people will come because they're saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. And so, I guess as a committee, we will have to make a decision. I agree maybe at the beginning, but I think it's left up to the committee at the end, because unfortunately, I've had meetings and things I go to, and I'm on a public safety committee or a different committee, and a public safety committee that I thought would end at 5 or maybe 6, goes to 9 o'clock at night. 9:45.
Oh, my goodness.
9:45 at night. And that is, and if it's something, I mean, you can leave, but then if you leave, people criticize you for leaving. They're saying, you know, council members are not being respectful, because we did the legislation, then the public comment comes at the end. And then if a lot of us have meetings at night in the communities and stuff, and we have to leave, then we're caught between, if I leave, they're gonna say that I'm being disrespectful, or do I go to this committee meeting, or what do I do, you know, and then, you know, and so, I just think we need to come up with something, if it's not legislative driven, that I don't know, let up the committee, but I'm just saying there's just all these scenarios that in terms of perception and how people are doing it, and then also, depending, where we are now, the culture we're in now is people are gonna always be speaking in our meetings. But at some point, do we just sit there until, I guess we can. I guess people saying that's how we voted to do that. But then you also voted to go out to these meetings at night with community folks in reference to stuff that's really relevant, that you gotta go to an NPU meeting, you gotta go to a neighborhood meeting, you may be on the agenda, and you're sitting there. And so it's just really very complicated. I just wanted to think about it as we having this conversation.
Dustin?
Yeah, so I'm good with this.
Speak up a little,
I'm
Dustin.
good with this. I mean, as far as I'm aware, this already happens in practice, right?
From most committees,
Okay.
but it's not required under the code to happen.
Right. And the only thing I would say to this is, I think Andre brought up, and at least in public safety, I know in a lot of other committees, we at least try to say that the public comment at the beginning of the meeting is supposed to be restricted to items on the agenda. Not saying it actually happens, but if this is to be codified, I would certainly want to have that as part of that codification.
I like that.
The beginning of the meeting, the public comment is restricted to items on the agenda, not
I like that.
what you did last night, or what you're gonna do next week, or all these other crazy things we hear at some public comment.
You carbonate.
All right, well, that is Ms. Archibald's legislation, so let her know if you have suggestions to
Have I been heard,
change
Ms.
it.
Archibald?
No.
See if there's anything else.
Anybody else have anything on this piece?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't.
But just quick, I don't want to be misconstrued. I don't think that Ms. Archibald's legislation restricts public comment, but I think it's just better to have the flexibility rest in the chair and the body as opposed to making a permanent rule, because there may be instances, some people take advantage of the opportunity to speak just because the opportunity is there. Okay? So if it's codified, some people may just show up to exercise their right, but if it's not there permanently, and there's nothing on the agenda that is burning on someone to want to make comment about, that may eliminate the need for someone to do that. And, you know, if people are there, you know, it is a challenge if you have to be somewhere else. But, you know, my father told me when I first ran, he said, being elected is a license to get cussed out. And it has held true all these years. And so people expect to see us, expect us to listen.
And we can't pop back, right?
Well,
Put that in there.
You can clap back, Joyce.
I'll leave that to your discretion. Yeah.
All right, the next item is, currently, we do not have any time limit for speaking by public officials or former elected officials. And so there is legislation, I can't remember if it's been.
It's a
Howard.
recommendation.
Yeah, I don't think that we have legislation before us, but it has been raised of whether we would like to change that to establish a 10-minute time limit for former elected officials to speak during public comment portion of full council meetings.
And I heard another iteration of that, is if you're a current elected official, you get 10 minutes, as we have on a motion. If you're a former elected official, you get 5 minutes.
I like that.
But there, sort of the thought there is when one of us speaks on a motion, we do have a time limit. And so it's 10 minutes when a member of city council speaks at full council on a motion, unless they ask for more time and are allowed more time. And so would it make sense to have current and or former elected officials have the same time limit that we do? Peter?
Put
No,
your card up.
Oh, sorry, Carla, you gotta put your card up, yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't here for the instruction.
I don't know who's first, Carla. You want to
But what
You
happens
didn't
when
ride
we
the
go
bus.
somewhere else, when we, as elected officials, go over to Fulton County, what courtesy do they give us? When we go to the general
Same time
assembly,
limit
what
as the public
courtesy?
in Fulton
I
County.
mean, when I've spoken at MARTA, I got the 2 minutes and everybody else was allowed.
And I got when I went to Fulton County before, I've gotten the same time limit as the public.
So that means 2 minutes, correct?
Fulton County was a little longer, but I forgot what the time frame was, but I didn't get any more
Over there,
time.
And the commission had to vote as to whether they wanted to hear from them.
Exactly.
That's kind of,
Well, that was a personality thing.
Yeah.
I kind of knew the answer to
Yeah.
that. I'm just making a point, actually.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right,
Cleta.
I'll just go around the table.
And then
Howard?
Michael. Oh,
Yeah, 10 minutes, I think that's fine for current. Why should they get to yak any more than we give ourselves? I think for former elected officials, you know, you were a citizen, then you became an elected official, now you're a citizen again. So be a citizen.
Yeah.
Don't forget
All right,
Cleta.
Cleta.
Okay. I'm kind of feeling the same way that Howard is feeling. He talked to me about this a couple of months ago, and I wasn't in agreement with him at that time. But there's so many people that are coming down, they're really bullying us. You know, it's become their bully pulpit, you know, city council chambers. And they're very disrespectful. You know, it's nothing wrong with coming down and, you know, voicing your opinion and saying what you need to say. But, I mean, we even have other elected officials that are coming from the state, you know, and disrespecting us. And we don't go up there and disrespect them. We don't go over to Fulton County and publicly disrespect them over to the commission. And
you should, okay.
we can, that's true, we can.
Yeah.
Sorry to add on.
And what has really happened is, out of all the government entities, and I've worked at the state, I've worked at the county, I've worked at the city, we are the most liberal out of all of them. And we get less respect, and it pisses me off. You know, we're an open book. Do you think that the state of Georgia, do you think they're gonna allow TV cameras up there? Hell no, because they don't want people knowing half of the stuff they're doing. Like video machines that they put in, okay, where people got the video, I'm digressing for a second, but they have them in these convenience stores, and instead of giving out prizes, people are giving out cash money. They attached that to a bill a couple of years ago. It's causing havoc, causing people to shoot each other in certain parts of the city of Atlanta. So, I mean, people can listen to everything we've got to say. The state doesn't have open meetings laws, but they made every other municipality in the state of Georgia to have an open meetings law. They don't have to have an open meetings law. They exempted themselves, which is fine. It's okay to do that. You know, the rule of rules, okay? So we need to just kind of tighten our ship up, and I think that people will really respect us more. So I don't think a person who is a former elected official ought to have more time than we do. I mean, we're getting, you know, the asylum is being run by the people who are ill. I'm not using the correct language, but it seems that that's true. You know, we're no longer running it. It's being run by other people. I mean, people are giving.
That's the quote for the day.
Yes, all right. Joyce, you follow that. What do you have to say on top of that? Yeah. Okay, Marcy, you.
So I just want to say, you know, we've got a 10-minute time.
Yeah. If that wasn't 10 minutes, it felt like 10 minutes.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
That feeds right into
Okay.
what I was going
Yeah.
to say. 10 minutes is long enough for everyone.
Yeah.
We should not allow everyone, anytime.
Yeah.
Like, I get the point within the first 2 weeks,
Yeah.
two sentences. But, and sometimes someone will give a story that I like, that makes it more credible. I get that. But when we went when I've gone to the MARTA boards to speak, they said 2 minutes. And they said, but if you go over a little bit, that's fine. A little bit. 10 minutes is a very long time.
Yeah, it is.
So I think that 10 minutes is the max for elected officials or anyone. And I definitely
When you
think
say
that
anyone, what do you?
Well, and-
you, me, everybody.
Well, and Marcy, I will say also, it's not in, wasn't considered here, but I have raised that issue of when people are allowed to add other people's time.
Yeah.
The current limit is about 16, and I think I would support taking that down to 10 and just having 10 be the cap. If you can't say it in 10 minutes, you need to go back and
That's what I'm saying. It's
collect your
10 minutes.
thoughts and.
And I agree with Cleta in the fact that
Yeah.
the reason, and I don't feel bullied, I really don't, not at all, because, you know, you.
Well, I can
but that's
handle
a-
it, but I'm
Yeah,
just
that's
saying,
what- I don't
it
feel
looks
bullied.
like that on television.
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, I really don't feel bullied. I don't.
Yeah.
But it's 10 minutes, and it should be 10
Yeah.
minutes for the time given to the speaker, and it's just
Yeah.
10. And it should be less for a former official,
Okay.
for sure.
All right, Joyce?
Well, I agree with Marcy, and even for a former official, you know, we should not treat them any different than we treat any citizen, because that's how we say they're a citizen again. And so the fact that we will let somebody who was previously elected and have them speak for 20, I've seen some of them speak for 20, almost 30 minutes. And I just think that's totally unfair. So I agree with the 10-minute rule. I agree with y'all when you were saying 10 minutes for everybody. I think just allowing people to speak over and over and over again, or giving them 15, 20 minutes when you start adding all this up is ridiculous. But does that mean that we're gonna just tell people they got 10 minutes from the beginning? Or are we just gonna say?
Well, after this discussion, someone will have to actually draft legislation for us to consider to do these things. So there's no legislation to do
Because
this.
then people start coming, everybody saying, well, I want my 10 minutes, just give me 10 minutes to speak.
No.
Well, no. I think we were saying it would, for the average person, it's 2 minutes. For former elected people, it'd be 10. And I would support saying the cap
Or
if you're
5.
adding time.
Or 5.
Or 5, whatever we want it to be.
Former 5.
Former 5, current
Current 10.
10, and then
Yielded time 10.
only 10, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I can go with that.
I'll,
I could go with that. And the other thing I was gonna say is, and I'm just gonna say, going back to Cleveland, I mean, I just think, that I do feel like we're being bullied. And, you know, and I think that the culture now has been one where, and what's amazing to me is how they come up to the mic, they say anything, everything, threaten you, take you out of office, do all kinds of stuff, curse you out. And we sit there quietly and listen. Sometimes I get to a point where I just like, I got to count to 10 and go out the room. Because, you know, sometimes I just think it's ridiculous, some of the things. Well, let's, yeah, don't, right. She's talking about a thing we all got ticked off when an elected official from the state came over and just really, I mean, just, I'm amazed at how we sit there quietly, and then our expectations are for us to just sit there and just allow that to happen. Then if we don't sit there, then they're saying we're disrespectful because we're not listening to them. But it's become one where, you know, they've said the same thing about 10, 15, 20 times, and they're just coming back in. I know you're looking at Joe, I can say, it's my 10 minutes up. But bottom line is, I was insulted yesterday that when Cleta was speaking, when we had this meeting about, we won't say the word, and people were just not even allowing her to speak. They were so rude and nasty. That really ticked me off. Now they can come up to the mic, they can say anything they want to us, but when we start deliberating and they don't like what we're saying, they get out and just start booing, saying all kind of nasty things. I find that to be so distasteful and disruptive to me, that we allow that to happen. And so, you know, I'm at a point where I'm just kind of over this whole thing of allowing these folks to speak, and then they not respecting us the way we calmly sit there and respect and listen to them and don't say a word. I'm just kind of over that. So that's all I have to say.
all right, Amir, and then Michael, then Dustin, and then we gotta wrap up my report.
I'm glad we're talking about this. I found some of the practices a bit peculiar. And I have actually a more restrictive view of this. I think, and I agree with the sentiment I think that's been articulated. One, former elected officials should have the same amount of time as an average citizen, because that's what they are. We're all citizens again at some point, and it should be 2 minutes. And frankly, I think elected officials should get 2 minutes. I think it should be 2 minutes for every. Now, I may be in the minority here, but that's my personal view. I think it should be uniform across. And I don't think, and we haven't had a full discussion on this, I find the practice of ceding or yielding your time to someone else a bit peculiar as well. I think you're a person, you have 2 minutes, and you use it or you don't, and you shouldn't be able to go and accumulate 10 or 20 minutes somewhere else. But I don't know if any of you have been following the LA City Council conversation that's gone on the last couple of months. So they gave everyone 1 minute, and they've had a lot of problems with people disrupting meetings, and so they started kicking people out of meetings.
Good.
And now that you've been kicked out, I think, twice, you can be banned for life from coming.
If you are rude.
And I was just pulling up the article, because it's gotten pretty contentious in LA, but I just noticed it coming through the council communications. But the lawyers over here pitching a fit. Because, I'm not saying we do any of that, but I'm saying that there is a spectrum, and don't worry, no, I'm not suggesting that. But there is worse behavior that other councils are grappling with and we're grappling with. But my view is I'm supportive of limiting former elected officials to 2 minutes like average citizens.
It is great.
We're all average citizens again. But I would like to see us actually apply the same to elected officials too. I'm not going to push back at 10 minutes.
Forrest, did you want to weigh in on this, or can I?
I just want to add something.
Okay.
Forrest Webb, municipal clerk. Prior to each council meeting, I'm out.
You're gonna have to speak up because the mic is way over here.
Prior to each council meeting, I'm out front of, I'm in the front of the council chambers as the public signs up. One thing that Mr. Faroki mentioned, the yielding of time. People are soliciting people they do not know to yield their time. There are a few groups that come in that are already organized, but at least 50% of the other individuals that are yielding time, they're soliciting individuals they're introducing themselves to and then asking them to yield their time.
Can I just finish one? So this is a broader, I think, balancing test of allowing there to be public comment, but understanding that this isn't the only time for people to influence or address us, whether it's through email or phone calls or in the lobby. And one of my early frustrations has been the inability, or if public comment gets obtuse and unwieldy, it hinders our ability to actually do the business of the committee or of the council. And so I think there's that balancing test of like public comment's important, it needs to be protected, but we're also here to do work, and we need to protect as much time as possible to do the work of the committee or the council.
All right, Michael.
I was second, by the way. And I've listened
You know,
carefully
I
to
can't
everybody.
multitask like I used to be able to, watching people put their
Yeah.
cards up and talking.
Well, I mean, I'm old school. I think if people want to come down and cuss us out, guess what? People have to come down and cuss us out. We are representatives of the public. We work for the public. We are in our seats because of the public. So if the public wants to come down and express their displeasure with us, however unseemly that it may seem, that is their right, because we are their employees and their representatives. So, I mean, that's just the way that I came up. And that if people want to come down and
just do it in 2 minutes.
Call us names. So I'm at Finis, and I listened to everybody, and I didn't interrupt anyone, and my card was up second. So I'd like that same respect that I gave everybody else, just like the public wants that same respect when they come down to our meetings. You know, when we express ourselves in our voice, we want to be heard, we want to be listened to. And I know sometimes it can be uncomfortable, but we should never, even when our names are called, we should never take it personally, because the mayor made a good point at the end of his statement. This is the only opportunity some people have to influence us in what we do. Not everybody emails, not everybody calls. Some people choose to come down. Some people just simply choose to watch on TV. And I don't think that we ought to abridge that opportunity in any way. The fact that the state or the county or somebody else limits the public, particularly the school board, which I've always found incredibly insulting. They limit our comments over there. We're not them. They are rude to do it, in my opinion. We should not mirror that negative behavior, in my opinion. I don't think we ought to do that. The city of Atlanta is not the state of Georgia. The city of Atlanta is not Fulton County. Thank God the city of Atlanta is not APS. The city of Atlanta is emblematic of something different, something better, something more progressive, something more open, something more sensitive to the rights of man and woman. And we should be very careful how we restrict the public's access to us. Having said that, having been in and out and back again as having been a former elected official, I would hope that we would not restrict former elected officials, particularly members of who have served in our own body, because that diminishes us ultimately if we do not recognize the service of others in that way, to allow them a few minutes at the beginning of our meeting. Yes, we get 10 minutes to speak on any issue throughout the entire meeting. So we're not restricted to 10 minutes for the balance of the council meeting. We're restricted to 10 minutes on each piece of legislation. People who are coming before us, and I'll give you a good issue, and I want to thank those who were serving during the Franklin administration, was the BFI garbage transfer station. I was an organizer with the NAACP. As a former city council member, I got to speak before the body and articulate a lot of great points. For those of you who are new and don't know about BFI, their garbage transfer station, we would have, if they had been, the administration had been successful, we'd have the largest garbage transfer station now where the Bellwood Quarry is, the great Beltline Park that everybody raves about. But because I was a former elected official, the coalition that I was with, who was advocating against that, I got to make points before the body that I couldn't do in 2 minutes. And I was pleased and reassured after having left the body that I was still I felt respected by the body as a person who had served. So I hope that we would consider that. You know, you get to take the title honorable with you when you leave the city council or any elected office. And I think we should continue to recognize it, even if our cousins across the street do not. You know, public comment, you know, I think we need to close the loophole that Forrest outlined, because people shouldn't do that. Well, because the reason why not is because we allow people to defer or gather around, have people defer their time when they restricted the time down to 2 minutes, right? Because people said 2 minutes wasn't long enough. Maybe it should be 16 minutes. Maybe that should be 10 minutes. But we still need to make sure that we are very conservative about the limits that we would apply to people coming down to petition us, talk to us, even cuss us out. Because, I mean, that's their right, and that's just how I feel about it. If we have to sit down there till 9:30 at night, guess what? We got to sit down there till 9:30 at night. When we got elected, when Marvin was the president, you know, Judy Hansen died, by the way.
Yeah, I just found out.
Yeah, she died. Former chief of staff to Marvin Arrington died last night. Yeah, but when Marvin was down there on a regular meeting, we would be down there till 9, 10 o'clock at night having the great debate on the issues. And that's our role. I mean, it's the administration's job to come in at 9 and leave at 5 and do those things. Our job is we're the people's access, right? So, you know, we can't turn around and say, you know what, people, we don't want to hear from you, or I'm tired of seeing you, or you're wearing me out, you know? I mean, that's not right, in my opinion.
All right,
you know?
Dustin.
Yeah, so I'll just say, supportive of a time limit in general. You know, I don't think it needs to be 16 minutes. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 8, 6, whatever. And I would say just taking, you know, former elected officials out in general, because if you were a good enough elected official, as a former elected official, you should be able to find a few people to allocate some time to you.
All right, Andrea.
I think that we have to be mindful that this is the government, and we have to have a heart. When you look at the eyes of those folks that have been down there for the past, I think 3 months. I mean, they went so far as to talk about my late father, which really, really touched my heart. And it was emotional, but they were trying to connect with me. They wanted to connect with me. So I think that we really just need to look at banning all of this and cutting folks' time. And when you look at what's going on in the AU Center, and you look at folks getting robbed, their children getting stuck up. They come to public safety, they come to CDHR because they're trying to connect and say, this is not working. So I just want us to be mindful of that when we make these decisions. Public comment is something that's very, very important. So when we say, okay, so you can't speak because of this piece of legislation, but someone's door was kicked in last night. I just want to just be mindful of how people feel.
I just have a quick question.
Yep.
So do you think that 10 minutes is not being mindful? I just don't know what the time.
I think that 10 minutes is great.
Okay.
I think that's good, but I just want us as a body to remember that we were elected. We were elected. And hey, I get tired at 9:30, 10 o'clock driving down Baker's Ferry Road, but we gotta hear them. We gotta listen to them. Well, I don't like people saying, hey, your daddy wouldn't have, you this, you that, you that. But hey, that's life.
All right, well, it sounds like there is enough interest in doing something here that we will get some legislation started, go through committee, and we'll see where it all ends up. And the very, oh, I'm sorry.
Who's left? Oh, Cleta. And,
Joyce and Cleta, and then we're gonna end
And
this.
I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, be quick, because I have one last piece, and Felicia told me 15 minutes ago that my time is up.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I can take the cursing out and all of that.
Right.
And you know what would be different for me if the folks who was cursing me out was actually citizens in my community. Because the people I see coming down there are the same group of people. And my question is, who are they? Where do they live? I'm not even sure if some of them live in the city of Atlanta. So for me, when I'm weighing everything, and I go out in my community, and when I'm leaving, going to a meeting tonight, I'm going to the citizens who really want to hear what I have to say. A lot of those folks, when you say we're leaving, it's not that. The other thing I just want us to be conscious of in terms of respect, I don't mind being cursed out, but I want to have them that try to give us the same respect, and if they can't, then we need to make sure that we're on point and making sure that when they do all that stuff, that we shut them down and allow them to.
But there is and I think that's a good point, Ms. Dennis, I think you should chime in here, because as a president, and I'm going in vain, that, people do have the freedom of speech. So if somebody says something that perhaps is not nice or nasty, we've had an opinion from the law department, which I believe is a correct one. So could you talk about that real quick?
Sure. So because we are talking about people's constitutional First Amendment right to free speech, there has to be, in whatever we do, there has to be a distinction between taking action based on the content of the speech and taking action based on the disruptiveness of the speech. So while those two things tend to go together, so that can sometimes be a fine line, but the point at which somebody can be removed from a meeting is when they are disrupting the ability of the body to conduct its business. That is a judgment call, and that's the judgment call that has to be made by the person who's chairing the meeting. But we have to be really careful, to the earlier point about us being government, we have to be really careful that we're not doing things that treat people differently based on what they're saying as opposed to how they're saying it. One thing that I would like to just throw out there when you are having the discussion about time limits is that the analysis from a legal standpoint about treating people differently with regards to any kind of speech is a compelling government interest. So if you are going to treat one group of people differently than another group of people with respect to a constitutional right, you have to be able to articulate a compelling government interest for that difference. So when you're talking about current elected officials, I could easily articulate a compelling government interest. You're interested in what the other members of your body are what their opinions are, or you're interested in the current elected officials in another jurisdiction that could have impact or sway upon your own decisions. It becomes much more difficult to make that argument for somebody who is, for all intents and purposes, a general citizen, even if they are a former elected official. So I just want to put that out there. That's an analysis that we'll have to do and make sure that we don't open ourselves up to constitutional challenges.
And I don't want to abridge anybody's right. That wasn't what my statement was about. Mine was more in defining a framework
No, and what I'm saying is just treating people differently.
No.
What you
I
said wasn't
got
a
you.
problem.
No. I got you, but I wanted to speak to the disruptive portion, because that's the part that concerns me, is that we seem like we're losing, when I say control, I'm talking about people yelling out at us in a committee meeting or in a council meeting. That has really gotten really bad this year. So I'm talking about putting a framework together so that when people come in, and when you set up rules and regulations, I mean, in anything, people will abide by those rules and regulations. That's why we have rules and regulations. Otherwise, we have anarchy. So I think there's a way to do it and to put the two together in terms of giving people enough time, but also helping the public understand. You know, I don't have a problem being bullied. You know, 25 years, I'm still here, so nobody's running me off any place. And they can say whatever they want to say about me. That doesn't bother me. But it's this disruptiveness, the yelling out and all of that. It's really gotten to a point that I haven't seen it before. And so I just think we need to be cognizant of that, okay? I mean, there was, and then I'll close it out. There was the other, maybe 2 or 3 committee meetings ago, where we were gonna move the public safety committee meeting to the chambers. And then we decided to move it back. But then there was a group that didn't know that we were moving it back to the committee meeting. And they had literally gone, even though that's their house, City Hall is their house, but they had literally gone into the chambers and they were sitting at our desks. So I'm just saying, some things, that I didn't see it, I just heard about it, but that kind of bothered me, because I'm saying, and maybe they have a right to do it, maybe they do it over at the state, but I'm just saying, it was just like, I'll just give you an example, it was just like when the homeless folks were sleeping in front of City Hall back in 05, 06, and 07, and 08. And I mean, literally sleeping in the doorway on Trinity Avenue. They were not sleeping at any other federal doorway or state doorway or county doorway but ours. And I told the administration, they're disrespecting us. Just ask them to move out of the doorway, and they did. So they stopped sleeping there. So it's all about just setting up rules and guidelines. And people, listen, they might get mad, that's okay. But they know they got guidelines. Any place they go. Listen, when a man goes into his house, he got guidelines to follow with his wife.
We're gonna, okay, on that, we're gonna, one more. Okay, everybody.
I do, Kristen, want to ask one more question on this, because it's come up a couple times in this meeting, about where we are talking about content and saying to somebody, you can only speak about items on the agenda. What is your opinion on that?
That's fine.
Yes.
Okay, there's a compelling government interest there. You have an agenda, you're having business of the body. That's what the purpose of the public comment is. We have no problem at all.
Okay, so if they're not allowed to speak, that is their only time to speak in the meeting, and they can only speak on items on the agenda, they can't talk about anything else, you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
And Jennifer, I got one more thing I'd say to follow up to Cleveland. If somebody's sitting behind our council seats and all of that, we got a security problem. We should not have citizens up in our area. We went through this whole training a year or so ago in terms of GDI. We active shooting. Active shooting. Citizens coming up and sitting at our desks and stuff, you don't know what they're leaving up there.
So I totally agree, but that's not the legislation we're talking about, so talk to Felicia about that.
I just think it's important that we make that point
Yeah.
right here, right now,
Okay.
so that we can make sure that we get all the entities involved with the police department, everybody, to make sure that's not happening.
All right, I'm gonna hand that to you to handle.
I got it.
The very last issue that I wanna float out there for people to start thinking about is the way that Atlanta City Council operates is items can stay on our agendas and held for the entire 4-year term. And that is unusual for governing bodies to do that, for them not to expire after a certain period of time, to not expire on an annual basis. There's a logistical reason for us to consider this, and then there's a other
Technical.
reasons. The logistical reason is that it creates an overload for our legislative management software. And when we start to get into year 3 and 4, it's a big overload for it to carry that. I think there are other reasons to just say, if you don't get to it within that time period, it's not, why are we holding on to it? So that's something
Can
that
I
I
throw
would,
one other reason? Of course, zoning and certain items need to stay on there
Yeah.
but when we keep accumulating them, we also can save the city some money, because when you get to printing these agendas, by the time you get to year 4, they're, I don't know how many pages.
yeah.
So,
So I would like us to consider that of many cities have it's in their rule that with the exceptions, we'd have to carve out as far as zoning, things that are in the process of a charter amendment and a public hearing, so you would carve things out, but the run-of-the-mill other legislation of everything automatically terminating at the last full council meeting, and then you have the option of reading it back in, just like Carla did with all the zoning papers at the new 4-year term, but we would do that on an annual basis instead of on the 4-year term basis, so people would know when it was coming up and know when they needed to read it back in to keep it going. But it would help with the, it would help Elms or whatever system we end up with run better. All of those vendors have said that that is an issue of the enormous volume that Atlanta has is very, very different from other cities, and it would help with the printing issue, and I think it would probably just be a good housekeeping matter. But, so there's no legislation pending on that, but we are starting to go through a procurement process on the legislative management software, and it's an issue that's come up there that they want to know sort of what our volume and load is, and so that's issue is out there. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that now.
Dustin has his
Okay,
hand.
Dustin.
Quickly, the only problem I see with that, you mentioned there would be carve-outs, but even something that's not waiting for a CDP or something like that, but say something got introduced in early or late November, and it's been held for, 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. So, I mean, there's a purpose that it's being held for. I mean, and there's other things that have been on there for a year that obviously need to fall off.
but
So
it
I think you
doesn't-
could just read it back in.
Like a hard,
You just reintroduce it,
Yeah.
the same thing, so it doesn't stop the fact that it was 3 or
but
4
then you're
weeks.
adding, aren't you adding more time to it then?
And aren't you adding the same volume
we
of
started
work?
the
That
same
sounds
volume.
like
Started here with the council.
plan.
Say that again.
If you have to start the process over.
Well, I mean, maybe
Starting
there,
the process.
There might be a way to affirmatively say
like
these
within a
things are
2-month
staying on.
period or something like
Instead
that.
of a calendar year, maybe
Year.
it's after.
6 months or
Yeah.
12 months or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
6 months, 8 months.
But I think that's something, whenever
Yeah.
y'all can flesh it out, we gotta keep moving.
I'll give you a quick thought. Maybe it'll be like a consent agenda, and you can pull off things that you want to keep.
But if it's
Yeah.
still on the agenda, it still has to be printed, and it's still in the
But you're
system.
saying when we get to
What I'm saying,
when we get to the
end-
housekeeping window.
that's
When we
cute.
get to that housekeeping time.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All,
That's cute.
Yeah.
50 of these legislations will be on this
Yeah,
destroy list, but,
Yeah.
or file list, and,
Yeah.
but if you don't want yours filed, then you have to pull it off.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
okay,
That's, and then you don't have to reintroduce
okay,
it.
Right.
Carla.
You know what, it's better than my idea.
Yep.
All right,
We'll
we
do
ready to move on?
Thank you. That was a
Can you
good
do it,
report.
would you do
Oh.
it every year, or every other year? So-
Every year, every year.
Well,
All right.
But I
thank
think this
you.
idea of, it would be a default, but there'd be an easy process to say, keep mine on here. We can start looking at the mechanics.
Thank you, Ms. I. Mr. Shook?
You're the only one clapping. Lunch is served.
Just as a reminder of how busy we've been, we have, the committee transferred 31 deeds back to APS. We passed an historic pay raise for police, which went entirely unreported by the media. We required supplemental information regarding our contract awards. We established the Division of Independent Procurement Review, and another procurement strengthening process. We now require a regular reports on what's going on with departmental overtime. Those are the kind of our big accomplishments to date. A reminder that on the 5th, which is going to be a fun meeting, Pursuant to state law, at 6:15, we're either going to have to come back or break from wherever we are in the meeting to allow the public to speak on the eminent domain, Rodney Cook Park paper regarding a couple of parcels.
That's a public hearing?
Yes, public hearing,
Second
6:15.
public hearing? What's it?
Yes, this will be the second public hearing. Although, I mean, and, you know, citizens had spoken at every committee meeting and council meeting for months on. So the committee sent the paper forward to council without recommendation. So it would be there if, after the public hearing, council decided to take action on it. And I've alerted the law department that it's quite possible that we would want to go into a brief executive session to get an update, which we haven't had for a couple of cycles now, on where the current negotiations stand. So that's coming up 6:15 on the 5th. Before you are copies.
Can I mention one quick
Yeah.
thing about that, since Ivory's not here?
Yeah.
Just to give people some background on that real quickly. And the reason all of this came up in regard to the park in the first place is back in 2001 and in
2002.
2002 and 2005, but definitely 2002, both Ivory's district and my district were impacted with flooding. My flooding was around Proctor Creek, around the Booker T. Washington High School community, Mosley Park, which is off of Martin Luther King and I-20. And then I also had Utoy Creek on the upper end of Cascade around John White Park. So I had two different sections. Ivory section was, that area was kind of in a bowl. It was Rock Street, and I think Tyler Street and some other streets. So his was in a bowl. The area in Booker T. Washington was also in a bowl. So we were able to kind of take care of that by we put a retention pond in a park further up the hill so that it collects water. The residents in Ivory's, the residents in my area wanted to stay in their homes. So we did some fixing up of the homes. The people over in Ivory's district, they said, we want you to buy us out.
Ms. Winslow, I hate to interrupt you,
No,
but if we get into the details of individual
but-
topics, we'll never.
I
do
know,
that.
but it's gonna come up before the
So
whole
we can do
committee. So
that-
Anyway, I just want to give them the
Okay.
background.
Okay.
That's the reason for it. And
Okay.
so they're on a deadline right now. They're trying to get some stuff done for the Olympics. And there's an opportunity
Olympics.
for the ladies.
Super Bowl, Olympics,
For
same
the Super
difference.
Bowl, I'm sorry. for the
Same-
Super
same
Bowl.
difference.
And there'll be an opportunity for whoever this person or persons are to have another bite at the apple. Because they can go before a magistrate judge, and that judge can determine, no, the city's not giving you enough money, and we can award you X amount of dollars. So that's all.
Mr. Shutt?
All right, something that we'll be tackling coming up soon is the compilation of our annual legislative package, our wish list that we send over to our friends under the Gold Dome. You have in front of you the legislative packages for the last 3 sessions, so the new members can get a flavor of the kinds of things we've been asking for and the way the information has been formatted. The package is a formal act of City Council that requires, you know, vetting and council approval. And we've asked Ms. Middleton to be here so that she could, you know, let us know some items that you already can anticipate are gonna, that the administration's gonna be asking for.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as is always the case, a lot of our biggest wins aren't getting things passed that are on the legislative agenda. They're wins on the defensive side, things that don't happen.
Come up right
that
now here
come
so
up
we can
during the
catch you
course
on the
of
mic.
general assembly. So please keep that in mind. Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Megan Middleton, Intergovernmental Affairs Manager, who all pretty know. Thank you. Pretty well know, I should say. So yes, we are in the process of drafting the 2019 legislative agenda. Normally, we would probably have the draft to you by this time, but they're still going through some items, some specifics we're not quite ready to talk about yet, and you will be the first to know. But we are still going through some of the items that they want to include in the legislative package. And what I would normally do is come to you all, get the draft to you so you can look it over, and also come to you or make myself available for each of you individually if you want to add anything into the package, or if a few of you or you as an entire body, and then that would also be voted on within the entire package. So the package is developed first with the administrative departments, and then we reach out to council members. It's a package for the entire city, so you all have, a vote on it, and then those are my marching orders. In addition to, as Chairman Shook said, any defensive measures that come up from other bodies or anything else that comes up that we may support. So I don't want to give a timeline at this point, but I'm hoping by the end of next week we'll have the draft to you all so that we can get that moving. But I am available. I will be out of town for a few days, but I'm available to speak with any of you individually. If you want to talk to me about something you're thinking about, and I can give you any advice as to how I think that might proceed or may not proceed across the street, we can go from there. But I'm available to you.
Give a brief, what's going on with the airport?
So there are some study committees that are going on right now. There is the Airport Study Committee. In the legislation that set that up, they allowed 5 study committee meetings. They have had 3. They tentatively scheduled one for last week, but they've held that off. Will probably happen after the election. So they have 2 more meetings. There may or may not be any legislation that comes from that, and the chairman has stated that each time he has started the meeting. So, we've had good representation there. President Moore has been there and has spoken a couple of times. Our outside lobbyist is well versed on this because he's dealt with this even longer than I have, and I've been here 12 years. So, and then we've had people from the airport speak. We've had bond attorneys speak. The bond attorney, even that the study committee brought in, actually helped our defenses. So Delta is very involved. So we've got the chamber, the Metro Chamber is very involved. So, we've got I would just say a working relationship on this study committee. So the next time that they, as soon as they schedule the next meeting, I'll let you all know. And also what the agenda is. Now, I will tell you the last 3 meetings, we've gotten the agenda basically 24 hours before the meeting. The last meeting, we thought we might be presenting on our procurement issues, our procurement process, and we found out the night before, 2 days before, that we were not going to be speaking, but that we would be able to speak at the 4th meeting. So I'll let you all know.
I know the first one was streamed, so I was able to watch it. I've been sending my staff.
The second and third one, all of them have been live streamed.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll send that link again.
Yes, send the link.
With the next scheduled meeting.
Okay.
And my office has also sent out updates every time we've gone with the link as well.
Right, yeah, got that.
Any questions on the airport study committee? I can give you a couple updates on a few others.
Well, so I know you said that the agenda is not ready yet. You said they are still working on it. Who is they that's still working on it?
I say we as on the administrative side. So working with finance, with law, they're just vetting some proposals. Is now the right time? How do we do this? Is this something that needs, there's a few in my head, but is this something that really needs state legislation, or is it something that the city can do through you all, through city council process? So those are the things, and that's because we were not set on each of those. One I feel free to talk about, but the others we're just trying to figure it out, and we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and say the wrong thing. Say the wrong thing here, and we find out we don't even need state legislation on it. One thing that has come up, and it's come up over the past couple of years, is the T-SPOS. There was 1/10 of a penny that we did not use in the referendum. We have been advised that to use that 1/10 of a penny, we will have to go back to the state to get reauthorization for that. And that would then, if we were able to get that, likely on the exact same issues to cover transit and transportation. And it would also, if it passes, it would still need to go back to the citizens for a vote. So it'd be a referendum again, if we're allowed to do that. But there's also some concern about having, at that point, do you have two T-Splice?
Sorry.
Well, I had a question about the airport portion, so if you
Just
want
real
to.
quick, we have to go back to the state to get that tentative penny reauthorized. Is the reauthorization of use of that penny that obviously the public would then have to vote on, or is there a reauthorization of use of that penny with a specific use for that tentative penny? We have to tell them what we want to use it for.
It could be used for public safety, it could be used for whatever we want, but we have to ask them
So it's just the
specifically.
reauthorization of that tentative penny, not the reauthorization and a specific use of the tentative.
Well, and currently, the thought is that it would likely be the tenth of a penny for the transportation issues, which is what the original legislation called for.
And I'm just saying,
If
it
you were to
doesn't have to
change
be
it-
for that.
But we had a tentative penny arts conversation
Right,
a year or two
we would
ago.
have to, we would, right.
Wait, I'm hearing something about
Okay.
public safety, so does it have
No.
to be used for transportation?
No, right now, she's saying, if that's what we wanted to use it for, we'd have to say that. I'm just saying,
Oh, we
just
have-
throwing out there to
I
you
got
all, if you choose to use it, say, for a public safety or something else, they still would have to authorize that use for that purpose, and then we would have to send that to the voters.
Okay.
I'm just letting you all make sure they don't narrow your thinking, that you can do whatever you want.
So we only have, I guess, 3 more council meetings in this year, correct? And so the legislative agenda by now would normally be on either the November 5th or, so being that we're behind as far as it coming before us, a mechanism to make that happen, I mean, how are you pushing towards that end?
Introduce some legislation, Mr. Dixon.
Well,
I'm just throwing out here so y'all know that you all have an option of setting the policy.
Right,
As
because we're
policy
waiting
makers.
on some stuff, and we'll send some stuff, obviously, but,
Mhm.
I mean, there's been, of course, we don't want the airport taken over, so, and there's been a lot of good work on that. I appreciate Council President Moore going to the meetings that ironically occurred during our Transportation Committee meeting. They literally
They
put.
don't care
the-
about
the-
you.
They put the airport meeting during our transportation meeting. So I appreciate you, and I think Mr. Westmoreland, Mr. Westmoreland went a couple of times. But what, are we doing efforts to lobby behind the scenes? Are we doing some other work that we should be aware of as council? I mean, I'm just, want to hear more about that.
So,
Or maybe if
so what
you
we're-
feel comfortable doing that another time, but I'd like that soon.
Yeah, so we as lobbyists, me internally and then our outside team, we are talking to members of the study committee. We've been talking to them since this time last year, when the bill was out there. So we are talking to members of the study committee and then just various members throughout both chambers. Right now, really focusing on the Senate chamber because that's where the study committee is. That's where the push seems to be coming from. So we are, doing our due diligence, or not necessarily in the meetings, but outside the meeting.
Ms. Shepherd?
I just want, how are we heard, boy, you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so, I just want to say we do the 10, I'm just gonna throw what I would like to see, if we had the 10% penny tax. We need sidewalks all over the city. So, y'all just don't know how much people beg us for sidewalks every day, all day. And we just don't have the money, we don't have the money, we don't have it. That's all I got to say.
This should take it on home.
But, so, yeah, just 2 observations or reminders. As we're thinking about what to put on the list, please bear 2 things in mind. We're going to be more successful to the extent that our list is supported internally by all the members, rather than, it's not going to be helpful if the left hand wants to do one thing and the right hand wants to do something else, literally speaking. The other thing is, it's always nice if we can refrain from putting things on there that are kind of gratuitous in nature. I mean, please remember that per the state constitution, Atlanta cities are entirely wards of the state. And so, good thing to keep in mind.
Did you have anything else?
I do want to just bring a couple more to your attention because they were things that you all have heard about, even dealt with during this last session. I want to say last year, but technically this year. And some things that may still be moving. So small cell towers, which is an issue that we're actually opposing the bills that were out there last year. And I think you all took up a resolution on one of those too, but they kept changing numbers on the bills. But they're still working on something right now. GMA, ACCG, and industry, mainly AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and they've also pulled in the power companies, are working on something. They were told by leadership, you all need to come up with something and get it done. They're also a little bit behind, but get it done before session starts. So I believe they have one more drafting meeting this week and talking about fees and costs. And that's something that we as a city have a problem with because a lot of the fees that they are talking about are well below the city's cost. So we're still working on that. So that may be in the news. You all will hear about it. I'll be coming back to you. And as soon as I see the draft legislation, I'm going to shoot it over to the department and of course the law department to see, how it would affect the city of Atlanta.
So what's the difference between, right now, are we dealing with the larger cell towers, the co-locator towers?
So they're talking about co-location, new poles, putting, our ability as a city to affect where these cell towers go. We are actually, even though many times they talk about the city, and I testified last year that you have to be careful when you talk about the city of Atlanta because you're not talking about the city of Atlanta. They're talking about how nothing can get done. Well, we walked in there, former Commissioner William Johnston and I walked in there with numbers, and out of say 286 applications, we had approved already like 260 of those. So and a lot of it is we're trying to get the industries to co-locate. That's the best. Use existing poles, but there's also a way that if they need a new pole and we can't find anywhere else, that the city will work with them. But we have costs to that, so we're trying to cover that.
Okay, and they're saying that they're going to the state now, saying that they want a reduction in the fee.
Right.
Okay.
Correct. And last year they were able to muddy the waters a little bit, but it came clear at the end. Luckily to a lot of legislators is that. Saving on small cell installations by the industry is they're not going to turn around and take that money and go put broadband in the very rural areas where they don't have any customer base. So that's, they were trying to cloud that last year and did a pretty good job for a while until we were able to kind of, with the ACCG and GMA, break that apart and say they're not going to save money here and then go spend it where they just don't have the customer base. We're all for, we want broadband everywhere, but.
So in other words, it's probably going to cost them less if they deal with small cells cell towers as opposed to the larger ones. Is that what I'm
I think so, but what they're trying to do is just the permitting process and the annual fee that they pay, they would just want lower.
Your next item.
Again, I just want to add, just because I came from that telecom background, this new 5G, the reason they're all interested in this is because it's going to take a lot more towers. The wavelength of 5G is so small that it doesn't travel very far, so they're going to end up having to put a lot more towers out there.
You can go to your next issue.
Thank you.
Another one that's coming up, in fact, they start their study committees the week after the election.
Just a little louder.
Is the shared economies, and especially as it affects like Airbnb type economies. So they have had they had a study committee meet a couple of times about 2 years ago. They didn't do anything with this last year, and they've got another study committee that, like I said, starts after the election. So we'll be involved in that, watching to make sure that they don't preempt cities from doing anything. If there's anything that were to come up, before the legislature meets or as the legislature's meeting. So that's something that obviously would affect really the city of Atlanta because we have more opportunities for this. Savannah already has something in place. We don't know what their legislation, if the state has legislation, what it might do to grandfather any in. So that's just something that you all will probably be hearing about, especially more as we get closer to the Super Bowl.
This was
Okay, right now, I like Airbnbs. I think there are a couple that are, there's one that's in District 4 and there's one that's in District 3. But it's under the special public interest zoning, so it's an overlay. So my concern is that if the General Assembly gets ahead of us with some legislation and we end up in areas that are not covered by SPI, and then we end up with kind of like rooming houses in certain areas that saying they're Airbnbs, do we need to be proactive now in terms of kind of protecting lower income neighborhoods where people may.
That's typically not where they are.
Hello,
The
Cabbagetown.
Airbnb is
I
where.
know, but,
yeah.
no,
Buckhead,
I know.
Midtown, you keep going?
I understand that, but what I'm saying is people can disguise
East Atlanta.
as an Airbnb and then use it really as a rooming house.
I got you.
Yeah, so that's just some food for thought. Do we need to be more on the offensive side and look at that as a zoning issue, perhaps, or maybe just wait and see what the legislation does?
It's about
Because I heard you say
taxes.
grandfathering in. And so in the SPI, they're regulated. So it's not where they're, and I've been in a couple of them, and they're nice, you know.
It's about taxes, isn't it?
Wait a minute, hold on. So answer her question then, Ms. Shepherd.
So I would say that, I mean, that's a good point, and something we should definitely be aware of, like you say. And so, you know, there could be exceptions in it written if there is any state legislation, or as they start to study these, and you know, I can have those discussions with members on the study committee to make sure that they're thinking about, and that's something I would do anyway with any other issue that we're thinking about, like, please keep these things in mind. And then we'll watch what they start discussing and where they're thinking.
So they're just
That's a
starting
good
to
point.
touch base on this, okay.
Ms. Shepherd?
Well, I know in my district, there are 2 Airbnbs on Deal Avenue. When we say they're not in community, they in our communities also. So it's not just, you think Midtown or Buckhead or somewhere, they're all over. And one of the issues that we get problems with is just Deal Avenue. You have an Airbnb and you got 5 people coming there for the weekend and they got cars. Where do you park on Deal Avenue? And then if they have a party and they hanging out, wait till the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Just wait till the Super Bowl. They're gonna be all over the city, everywhere. And then you're gonna start getting people in residential areas who complaining because you got this house full of people, they partying, they parking all down the street. There's no regulations on them, and we also not getting no taxes on it. So I think it's something that's a little bigger than what people think it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shook, next item.
Yeah, final thing is, I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to see if we can achieve a consensus on what a legal bonusing policy would look like that would pass muster with our code, the charter, and the state. Remember that earlier this in the spring, we had 2 reviews that both said our current practices did run afoul, certainly, of the state gratuity clause. And so there are ways to fix that don't involve a whole lot of cutting and pasting. My sense is, as a body, we would still like to retain the ability to bonus staffers. But if we do want to do that, we're going to need to rely on, I think, law. They're here today, audit, they're here today, they participate in one of those reviews. And so I'm hoping that we can hear what a compliant policy would look like, just in its just bare bones structure, and then that would allow us to decide if we wanted to flesh it out and,
Who wants to start? No, come on, come on. I need you to come up here so we can get on the mic.
No, I would just say, generally, it's just a matter of codifying what you're going to do. I think that probably in practice you've been doing, and maybe people know, but the important thing is to set forth the guidelines as well as giving prior notice that they are going to get bonuses. So I mean, that's the big thing, is just codifying it so that so that it's clear and it's communicated ahead of time, because you can't do it prospectively.
Right.
It's,
So there was a resolution introduced in finance that recommended that we devise such a policy, and that before it comes back to us for final adoption, that it's reviewed by audit, ethics, and law. So that everyone puts their John Hancock on it and says, yeah, we're, based on my experience and my training, this is the way to go. So when you say, well, it's kind of a simple matter, I would like for law, in collaboration as you see fit with ethics and/or audit, to present us just informally with a draft, and then we can take it from there in terms of introduction. And
happy to do it. We had already started, so we're happy to do that.
okay, when do you think we might get a draft?
Can y'all give me 2 weeks?
Sure. I mean, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on that? I think that's an easy solve for that.
Okay.
Just so I'm aware, then, if it's in 2 weeks, then prior notice, prior notice is that a collective or is that an individual?
Just don't give any bonuses till we pass
I'm actually trying to preempt that. I'm trying to basically be ahead of the
let me just
Christmas
say
bonus
this,
season.
if you want to do it now, I would just, this is not best practice, because I think it needs to be something consistent, but if you generally want to do it, then you can probably write something saying, that you're going to do it. It's just.
Right.
She would prefer us to wait till we talk about it.
Right. I just wanted that to be out there so that it's
I
not,
understand.
this office is doing it and this office isn't doing it, and we trying to give explanations. I think probably.
So I
it
don't
should
know
be-
if it's possible to move it up so that the council can vote on it sooner rather than later.
I can certainly try. I can give it my best effort to try to have something.
If not, then, your staff may just have to wait to after the first of the year, and it can pay for all the bills that they racked up before. All right, thank you.
That is all.
Okay, so now we're going to move to our policy and research. Mr. Pace and Mr. Webb will be taking over from here to have a discussion.
Good morning, Forrest Webb III, Municipal Clerk.
You got to talk up so we can get
Forrest Webb III, Municipal Clerk. I'm being joined by Mr. Theo Pace, Council Staff Director. Good morning.
Thank you.
I will let him start off.
Okay, as part of our discussion, we wanted to let you know where we were with the parliamentarian for 2018. Mr. Dennis Conway has been with the council attending our meetings since August of this year. And he has provided some recommendations that we've had related to our meetings. He sat in our committee on council meetings. He's watched various meetings that we've had, in addition to sitting on the dais during the council meetings. Some of the recommendations that he's made is that related to our substitutes, a lot of the information that we substitute as far as account numbers and different things like that are technically under parliamentary law amendments.
What?
Amendments. So things like striking language, inserting information into legislation is technically an amendment. Changing of account numbers is also an amendment. Under parliamentary law, a substitute is actually when you're striking entire paragraphs of legislation and then inserting a new paragraph. So one of the recommendations that he actually made to Mr. Webb and I is that for uniformity, that we should be amending legislation as to in lieu of substitute. Wanted to bring that to you.
Unless it comes to the level of a substitute.
Unless it comes to the level of a substitute. We noticed that at some of the council meetings where instead of legislation being substituted, it was being amended. But to bring uniformity as far as on the committee level in your committees, that was one of the recommendations that he made. I think one of the other things he did the full council meeting was that if there's no objection to going into a committee of the whole or anything like that, that we necessarily didn't need to take a vote on it. But I think prior practices and historic, where if there's no objection, that means that the entire body is in favor of it. Correct.
Correct.
But I think historically, we've always taken that vote for the minutes of the committee meeting minutes.
That's absolutely correct. And a lot of times, if we don't take a vote on the floor, Teresa Payne will reflect that in our minutes, that it moved forward without objection. So we do both, but this is just a housekeeping measure.
The agreement with Mr. Conway expires at the end of the year. So I know that there was going to be some discussion of whether he wanted, the council wanted him to continue on.
Now's that discussion.
I'm sorry? Correct.
Now's the time for that discussion.
Right.
So you want to give it, do you have an update on how much?
So through yesterday, he actually submitted his invoice for October yesterday. He's been paid $5,700.
How much?
$5,700 for the months of August, September, and October. The agreement that was passed for council authorized up to $49,000 to pay him.
Was that our only recommendation? Oh, sorry.
We actually voted. There were
You
two-
started off with 6 months, and we know we had that pot of money, which he's really underspent considerably what we were anticipating. And we only said we were going to do it 6 months because people wanted to see how it worked. So now it's the time for us to decide whether we want Committee on Council to take up extending that. We do have, how much money left in that pot?
little under $39,000.
So, I mean, he's spent less than 6,000 now, for how many months? About
3 months.
for 3 months. So it's up to the money's there, so that's the discussion. Do we want to continue with the parliamentary? Ms. Winslow, Ms. Shepherd, Ms. Hyde.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I heard that he's recommending about, is it about 6 or 7 changes, or is that just, you just giving us a sample of?
It's pretty much two.
Kind of what he's done.
Dealing with just substitutes and amendments.
Okay.
Just for more clarity.
Okay, so.
In addition to that, I believe his services are to assist the council in meetings when there's certain parliamentary issues that come up as well. So it's not just providing recommendations of how to more efficiently run the meetings or anything like that, but using parliamentary law to assist us with expediting the meetings.
So, but I have no problem with him continuing on, you know, to help us refine our ordinances. I mean, I thought that was the goal, was for him to come on board and just look at everything over a certain period of time, and then to make recommendations to us as to how we could tighten up, you know, our rules.
He has reviewed the code, and
I
I'll
was
let
going
Ms.
to jump in
Hyde.
and say that he has been working with me on Committee on Council of reviewing the charter, the code, the rules, and looking at all of that for consistency to make sure that there aren't any inconsistent parts that we need to change, and also looking at, can we streamline our rules and make them more user-friendly? And so that has been with research and policy, that I've talked about it with law now, so that is also part of what we spent money on so far, as he is working on that process still.
So on a whole, all of that will come back to us at
Yes.
some point
Oh,
in
yeah.
time, so we
Yes.
can look at it and review it.
Yes.
Okay, so we just need to continue with the process. Okay, that's what I needed to know. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shepherd?
Well, I think Jennifer just answered some of my questions too, along with what Cleveland just asked. I personally don't think we need them ongoing. I think he should come up with a report within 6 months. Tell us what, unless he sees something just crazy we're doing. I mean, it's a way for us to analyze what we're doing as a council and see if we can make some recommendations. So I personally don't think we need to have him just ongoing. It's great he's under, the cost is under what we thought, but I personally don't think we need him forever.
Well, I'm gonna put up my card just, as the president. I find it extremely helpful. It is, and when somebody told me, as you all remember when we had the first retreat, we had someone come and sort of do a little mock parliamentary thing, and she kept saying to me, Felicia, you need a parliamentarian, you need a parliamentarian. I'm like, you know, I have a working knowledge of parliamentary procedure. I'm good, I can handle it. And then something happened at a meeting that made me think, you know what, this makes sense. It seems maybe easy, but it's not. It's very difficult to be sitting there, making sure you checking what the audience is doing, making sure you checking what the council's doing, making sure you keep it on agenda, keeping up with motions. It's very difficult sometimes to do all of that and not have somebody else making sure the steps are made. Because you can very easily have a motion and maybe not got a second and you've moved on. And so I have found it very helpful, particularly before I even say something, to be able to refer and say, hey, I'm about to do this, is this right? Or is this wrong, so that we don't get into issues. So I'm just gonna say, I would hope that the council would consider. We did the 6 months trial. For me as the president, it's been extremely helpful. I know he has other suggestions, but I think the way he put it was, you know, I kind of need to know, it would be nice for the council to know whether they want to continue this, because I don't want to come in and start suggesting a lot of stuff if I'm gone at the end of the year, because I'm not there to help with the process. And everything he suggests, we don't necessarily have to do, but I'm just going to say, as president, I find it very helpful. I think it helps us have an expedient meeting, and I would hope that you all would consider redoing the contract for the year, because I think we can afford it with the money we have, or at minimum for another 6 months, so that we can continue in the same vein. I find it to be helpful. So that's my standpoint. Ms. I, and then we'll go back to
I was just going to give a last little update. We are hoping to have this project he's doing for Committee on Council done by the end of the year. Then it will come back to council to decide whether we want to make this series of changes to the rules and all that. So it would be helpful to me to have him on for at least a little bit going into next year, while if people have questions and we work through any legislation on rule changes and all that. That's sort of a different standalone project from having him there. But even though I think we'll have the recommendations back, it'd be nice to have a little bit of tail on that to be able to get that across the finish line and get any changes to the legislation.
Ms. Winslow?
Yeah, I thought that we originally talked about what I think Jennifer's saying, is that he was gonna be there for the period of time. You know, he worked out in Conyers, so he, you know, when I talked to him, he said, this is what I did out there, which is.
He works for several bodies, works for he's a parliamentarian for ARC. He's
Right.
parliamentarian for another, several places.
Okay, so I think what was talked about was not the permanency, but what was talked about was him looking at our rules and making sure that we have everything in order. And so I was certainly in favor of that. I think that what Jennifer's talking about, where she needs him to continue, and he helped me understand and remember, I thought we had it, was it for a year?
No, what we decided was to do a 6 months engagement
6 months, okay.
as a test, because remember, some members even questioned whether we needed a parliamentarian. So we got to the point where everybody agreed that we would give it a test run. So now we've had this test run and we see what the parliamentarian can offer. Now we're at the point of deciding, do we want to engage the parliamentarian for a year, another 6 months, or how do we want to proceed?
I mean, and I don't know how far Jennifer is, but I don't know how much.
I'm just
long
saying,
you
I think it
need
would
her. I
be-
don't want to handicap what you're doing.
You know,
But that's one part of
That's
it.
what-
Don't forget my part.
The one part that I'm doing,
Right.
you know, I would like to have him still be there when it comes through Committee on Council and it comes through committee to be able to answer questions. It may be legislation
Right.
that we get through in one cycle, it may be that it takes a couple, and so I would like to have him.
Yeah, I don't have any
Yeah.
problem with that, because I think that was the agreement that we started out with. I'm hearing something different now.
Now, my part is,
In
as
terms of
the
something
president,
permanent.
I would like the parliamentarian to continue to be available at the meetings.
Okay, what,
And that was another part of what the test was as well, to see how that worked.
so, the first thing I would want to see is once he and Jennifer have come up with whatever information they have, is for us as a council to be able to look at that and analyze that. And then maybe the next step might be, it doesn't sound like it's somebody that, even if we went to say, to give you somebody for 2 meetings a month, that we would need somebody full-time, so that's what I'm getting.
He only we only get billed on his time that he spends. We don't, it's not like a stipend. So we're billed per the hour, the times that he spends.
Right,
We're
okay.
not just paying him a
I
salary.
got you. So that's why I'm asking questions, because I'm trying to.
That's why it's probably a lot more contained, is that he's only charging us for what he has spent.
Right. So I think we're talking about 2 phases. One is him finishing up what we've got, which we need to add more time onto that, which he's only done 3 months, is that right? Or has he done 6 months, so we need to extend it another time period? That's what I'm trying to understand.
So we did the test for 6 months. His charge was to do what he does as a parliamentarian, help us and be present at the council meetings, which is the part that I would like to keep. He's also been advising both the clerk and the director of research staff on different issues. And he's also been assisting the committee on council on reviewing the rules, et cetera. And he's invested his time in understanding our charter, our code, our rules, and understanding our processes.
Right.
So now that trial period is ending at the end of the year, and the discussion we're having now is, I'm recommending, I think the staff is recommending, that we extend it. And the question is, do we extend it as a year contract, which I think would be appropriate, or another 6 months, or whatever you all choose?
And what I'm saying is, we haven't seen the information that you guys have presented. So I'm just saying, I don't want to take up all the time talking. Everybody, other people been talking. What I'm saying is, if we're going to extend something, I want to see something in writing.
If I can interject.
You got me?
Yes.
So I'm not saying I want to extend it for a year.
Okay, well,
I'm
he
saying
wants
I
to.
want to extend it for a period that she has time enough to get something done so that a report can come back, so that the council has an opportunity to review what he has, and then to see what are the other steps that he needs to take to tighten up whatever it is that Mr. Pace needs in terms of his guidance, whatever it is that Mr. Webb needs in the future in terms of his guidance. And you've already said what you need is him to be there for the council meetings to help, do some administrative parliamentarian things. So that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, Mr. Webb wanted to add in.
What may not have been clearly stated is that everyone had a document that he prepared for the city council, and it should say substitute on the top of the document that you had when you sat down.
Is it in here?
Yes, ma'am.
It passed.
It should be. That is only his first recommendation, but in doing his due diligence that he's been engaging with Councilmember I, that's what we're trying to lay out, how he will proceed with doing that. The other aspect is the council meeting engagement. He engages with the clerk, he engages with the law department, he engages with the president, and it has worked pretty well. He's not trying to change anything that we do. He's actually, at this point, learning how we do things and how we can enhance what we do for transparency purposes.
And I'm not indicating that he is. I just think we need to have a sit down eyeball to eyeball with him because we're paying him. Yeah, we're his bosses. You got it here. Oh, this, okay. That's all I'm saying, but I don't want to stop the flow because Jennifer needs to continue with what they're doing together. So I'm thinking maybe.
And I'm sure Ms. I will have some opportunity where he'll come to the meet or work session or whatever.
Right. So we need to extend it. I think
it's really tedious what he's doing for me, so I really
what amount of
appreciate
time
his
we
work.
need to extend it to. Yeah.
I'm all right with that. Let's go extend it.
Okay. So the Committee on Council will, Ms. I, come up with them a recommendation. and put it in piece of legislation. And I would suggest maybe start with the year, and then council members can debate to amend it if necessary.
How much time do you need? Is it a year or 6 months?
Well, I think it's the two different parts of it.
It's more than that, it's 3 different parts.
Okay.
It's what he's doing for Ms. High, it's what he's doing for the president, and collectively what he's doing with the clerk as well as the.
And I guess I want to see what he's doing for us in writing, and she's going to get that for us before we go to the year of what he's doing.
And we can debate that when we get some
Why
legislation.
don't we'll lay it all out, the
Okay.
3 different parts of the legislation, and then if people want to amend it, people want to do something different.
And
we'll
he
do
can
that.
be there when we discuss it so that he can give you his sense of why he thinks he needs that particular
Okay.
time. Okay?
Thank you.
Next.
And,
I had my thing.
Oh, wait a minute, sorry, Mr. Bond.
Yeah, this is not impressive to me. When I first got on the council and served through 2001, when I came back in 2009, they were substituting rather than amending as expedients in committee. I mean, for my own self, only speaking for me, I really don't, and I've heard what everyone has said, beyond the initial 6 months or whatever Jennifer needs, I just don't see the need for this person to be here. We're elected to do these jobs. We're elected in our own capacities, in our own roles, to manage the business and participate in the meeting. Once we've been shown the corrected course and have a corrected parliamentary correct set of rules, which we already do have, they're based on Robert's Rules of Order, we just need to keep going. I don't see the need to justify to continue to pay him to sit on the floor. And if we've got, no offense, gentlemen, I mean, but I don't see the need for you all to have a parliamentarian either. I mean, I just don't see the need for this beyond him doing an analysis and giving us a report. I don't see the need for it. And, he's got an almost permanent desk up there now, and he's only supposed to be here 6 months, and this doesn't impress me at all. If he's looked at our rules and he's been here 6 months, and this is all he's coming back with.
No,
He's
got other documents he's worked with Ms. High. I don't think this is the totality of his work. So I don't want that to be stated, that that's all he's done.
Well, I mean, but that's what's being presented to us today. And then it's being presented to us today that the desire to have this guy be here for a year. And, I've talked to him during the meetings. I think he's a nice guy. And I'm sure he does a good job for these other boards that he might advise. But, I think this, I just don't see the necessity for it.
Would you like me to respond?
Well, I mean, you're welcome to respond.
I just want to say that,
I mean, I knew when I came back in '09 that we shouldn't have been substituted, we should have been amended.
Correct.
But that had become the common practice of the body,
I just wanted to add to what you said is that first, I do not need a parliamentarian. I'm not saying that I need a parliamentarian. What happens on the council floor is that when there are conflicts and I interpret Robert Rules of Order one way and the law department interprets it another way, the only benefit that I've really seen from it is we have a neutral, unbiased individual that is giving a third opinion on how the president should rule or interpret something. That's the real benefit that I've seen. Everything else has been enhancement, but to your point that, no offense was taken when you indicated that you didn't think we needed. As a part of my training, we undertake parliamentary courses. So subsequently, it depends on the interpretation of the individual, but this is not anything that I'm certified in per se. So to have someone, it's an enhancement, but I'm not saying that, I need somebody. I want to be clear on that.
Because it's the presiding officer that needs the parliamentarian versus the clerk.
I hadn't relinquished the floor.
Okay.
So,
Nobody's taking it from you?
no, he asked if he could speak,
Yeah,
so I allowed it.
Okay.
But, again, I think probably a better course for us is not to have a parliamentarian per se, but why don't we just get parliamentarian training? I mean, we're elected to be accountable for the things we do on the floor. This guy, whoever it is, whether it's he or someone else, they're not elected. They're not even technically really appointed. We hired them to give a non-binding, non-really accountable opinion. So if you got 3 opinions, it's ultimately going to come back to the body to make a decision, either to affirm or override whatever decision the president's going to make. So it still comes back to us. So for me, I'm only one of 15. I would rather us just go get the parliamentary training so we all have the same knowledge, so that we're all brought up to speed and know the same thing, and then move forward, and we don't have to pay somebody, just going on, just really just sit there, because, I agree with you. I just don't think we need it.
Finish?
Yeah.
Ms. Overstreet?
Well, I thought maybe I was missing out on something because I don't know what all we're paying him to do. Because Ms. Ide has something, we would like to know that, like as a body, we need to know what he's working on. That's so,
Nobody knows.
So maybe she can have them come to a meeting and invite everybody so everybody can get up to speed.
Email it. I don't mind you guys
Okay.
sending it instead of another meeting, but, maybe that'll help, because then you'll get into, is this the right amount of money to be paying for that? And, we just need more information so that we can figure out if we are spending the money properly. And what else can the money be used for? I certainly don't think that we can't govern ourselves in a parliamentary way indefinitely, going forward once we're done with them, whether it's 6 months or a year. And what's the 6-month date? What would that be?
This current one, we did the 6 months, so it ends in December 30, the end of this year. So what's coming up now is whether we want to continue for another 6 months or a year or however, whatever the body chooses.
And so by this December, we may be up to $8,000?
I doubt it, because there's only 2 more meetings left and, 3 meetings,
So he's done how many meetings for $4,000?
It was.
So he started in August, and he sends his invoices at the end of each month. So he just sent October. So there were 2 meetings in October, 2 in September, and 2 in August.
So that's 6 meetings, plus the review that he did for Ms. I. That was a whole nother setup.
Okay, and see, that does sound like that's a set amount of time. It's a project. So we just have to, has he already invoiced us for what he's doing for Ms. I?
Yes.
Yeah, we really just need to know what he's doing and for how much to see if it's, December 31st or August the 31st, June 31st.
So if we can get everybody a reporting of the invoices and what they were for, as well as what the preliminary information he's given to Ms. I, and then.
And revisit?
Yeah. Ms. Shepherd?
I'm just going to listen to what Ms. Oz is saying. I think what I heard her say was she wants to make sure that he's finished, that he's been very helpful for her. She wants him to complete the work. Right. And that may take a moment for him to complete it. You think it'll be by the end of the year?
Well, I think I would like him, we're gonna try to have draft legislation by the end of the year to the extent that we need to make changes, but then it probably won't get
So when will his
heard
report,
until.
when will this report that he's doing for you, when will he actually give a report to us?
I mean, I think by the end of the year, he will be able to make recommendations of this is where I think we need to make some clarifications or changes.
So I don't want to jump into what he's doing now. I would wait to just have a report at the end, thus far what he did in 6 months, with any recommendations. And then if we need to extend it for just a bit based on the recommendations, then have a work session at the end or a discussion at the end of what his recommendations is. Then we can make that decision in terms of where we're going. Because if it was just based on meetings and this amendments, I would say, but if he's got other things, I would be interested in seeing what he has to say.
Yeah, and the only thing I would just caution everybody is just maybe to, even if it's a smaller period of time, that before the end of the year, what we don't want to do is be out of a contract that is expired.
But is this what we all agreed on? Did we agree?
We agreed to 6 months.
For parliamentary.
Right.
Right, right.
So I'm saying now, is he checking with all of us to see if we need anything? I'm just,
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he.
What is this about?
So we did the 6 months. Remember, as president, I was asking for a parliamentarian at the meetings. So he's doing that.
Okay.
In addition to that, he's helping Committee on Council and looking at reviewing everything.
And that really was in the context of making sure that our rules are consistent with our code, and that our rules are clear and easy to understand, and if there are places where our rules may not address an issue that he sees that comes up in a meeting, and he may point that out and say, would you like to address that in a rule, or would you like to just defer to Robert's Rules of Order on that point? So it's those sorts, it's all related to procedure, not on, oh, I think you should have a new committee that does blah, blah, blah. It's on the procedural.
And they're
how
all
our rules apply to running our
recommendations.
meetings.
So what I'm hearing is, it may be, and the Committee on Council needs to address it, because I don't want us to be out of the contract if people want him to finish the work. Maybe it's 3 months or something. Or we fashion the contract where it's 3 months and then month to month if it takes long, just so that we're not out of the contract, so that he can finish the work that he's doing. And then if the council just decides we don't want to have a parliamentarian anymore, we don't want to pay for it, then when it runs out, it runs out. That's why they're coming to you now, because we need to make sure we decide on that contract, which expires at the end of the year. And don't forget, we have one council meeting in December. And so whatever we do, we need to do it before then. That's the last opportunity for the full council to vote on it. And then you have the committee meetings the next week, and then we're on recess.
So you're saying we got to vote on it by at least whether we're gonna keep his contract by December?
Which is start another one, really, for 3 months or whatever. I'm suggesting, because people are unready, maybe just 3 months, and then we'll see how far he gets with Ms. Ide's information.
And we just make sure that this is full of everything that he's doing.
And there's another document too.
With some dollar amounts.
Okay,
So that
all
we
right.
can make a good decision.
Okay.
I think I'm going around, Mr. Massakite.
We probably spent more than $15,000 talking about this. If council president feels like she wants a parliamentarian, I'm voting for a parliamentarian for as long as she wants it. End of story.
Okay, Mr. Dickens, thank you.
Yeah, my remarks were kind of similar. We kind of what they call major and minor, for lack of, don't want to be the council smart ass, but
That is my job, it is already said.
yeah, we're gonna fight over that one. But I think that we've selected it for 6 months. Let's get the reporting that we want. I just ask that we also do this, and no offense to the departments I'm going to mention, but we hire a lot of outside lawyers, a lot of consultants, and we get 0 types of reports that are up to the specificity that you're asking for the parliamentarian. That's about $5,000. So I know the smart ass I'm getting arrow shot at me probably right now about this, but the thought is, if we should probably create a reporting structure for everything we do there. Meaning monthly reports of everything, everybody that we pay, that's an outside consultant, that's a $600 an hour attorney, that's a lobbyist, that's a consultant. Let's do that. Let's go hard on all types of reporting versus the little man in the corner that's doing the parliamentarian work that we smacking around right now. I'm saying there's a whole bunch of people doing a bunch of stuff that we find out when the paper tells us about it. Or we get it in a full write-up it's kind of, aggregated versus specified. So again, I'll take that arrow for those who want details. Let's get them from the expensive folks. Let's get them from the folks that can attract attention to us in a way that we don't want. So, is there a legislative thing that I can do about that?
Sure, you're a policymaker. But I just want people to understand there was no thought that he would not give an ending report. And so let's start there. We just wanted to make sure we brought this conversation up at a point where we could have time to decide on that contract. Ms. I does have the document, the draft document that he did. We will make sure everybody gets that. You have part of the thing that he brought up on the substitute, and they will give you a more detailed understanding of the invoices, and hopefully at the next cycle that we can make a decision on a time frame to extend this, and then if we need to come back and discuss it again, we can. But I do like your idea, Mr. Dickens, because, but I don't want to get off, I'm not going to be the one to get off on the subject. Ms. Boone?
Yes, quickly, I thought we were just hiring him for the parliamentarian, for your meetings. Now, I'm hearing that he's helping her with some stuff.
We talked about that too.
And, I don't want it to become a question of, our staff's competency. And if we just need him for, if you would like him for your meetings, I think that's what he needs to be utilized for. We have the law department, we have $190,000 worth of staff that we pay. And if it's something that we need him to just be the parliamentarian at our council meetings, I think we shouldn't just try to, it's like we're trying to create something.
No, so when we initially did it, this is not new. We discussed being doing that, the meetings, also him reviewing, because Ms. I was in the process even at that time when we discussed it about reviewing our rules, because parliamentarily, there's certain things that go in the rules, and there's the other part. So that was already discussed.
But if we could narrow his.
That's all he's doing. He's not doing
but he's
committees.
dealing with him, her,
Because they have a part of what we asked him to do. And so he's not doing anything we didn't ask him to do when we initially put him on.
But if that's something that you feel that you need, we need to figure out, just make that happen at the council meetings, and then that will be his scope, instead of him doing a lot of.
Well, he only comes on Mondays, on days of the council meetings.
Right, other than the work he's doing with Committee on Council, and we did talk about that. So he's not doing anything that we didn't ask him to do. He's doing that, and, he's doing that. Ms. Winslow, and then we're going to end it hopefully.
I think that's what I was trying to understand, what the question that Ms. Boone asked. But I think it's a good idea, what Michael said is, because we have our rules of council, and we do need to get trained on parliamentary procedure, because that's how we kind of got him in the first place, is that sometimes we were getting one thing from the law department and something else from, the clerk, from the clerk. And so, just like he understands parliamentary procedure, if I'm president of a neighborhood organization, I need to be able to understand that as well. So we need to be able to understand what he's going to give back to us as what's going to be in our rules. So that's why I think we need to have a work session, so that when all of this stuff comes up, when we're putting up motions and amendments and substitutes, that we know what's going to be in our rules that he's going to put in there. So I'm agreeing with you, that makes sense. We need to know what's going to be in our rules. We don't need to have somebody out there who knows our rules and knows what's in our ordinances that we don't know it.
Well, and I would love everybody to know the rules, but that's good. And the thing is that he has said, he's available to do the training. And I think there's a level of training that everybody would have. Understand as well that his level of training is always going to far and exceed our level of training, even mine, and I kind of know a little part of parliamentary procedure because he is certified to do it. So we're just having somebody with expertise, but I think we're at a point where we can move on from this subject and bring together a proposal and have the reporting that we talked about, and then make a decision.
But we need to extend this contract. I'm in agreement with that. Okay, if it's monthly or for 3 months or whatever.
Right, and so that's fine, and that's why I want to, let you know where my comment came from. You guys started off this conversation with, and he's working on something with him, and he's working on something with her, and it just sounded like too much something. But as soon as she explains it and it makes sense, and that's fine. So as long as it's not some, something, and it's something that actually, benefits us all, then it's fine.
And we're gonna get everybody more detail.
Right.
More detail, just so that everybody knows. Any other subject?
Currently, I don't have a report to actually make, but I do have a couple announcements. As you know, we have an election on November 6th, and we have 2 questions on that ballot, one being the Sunday brunch, and the other being the APS homestead exemption. This will be the last week of early and advanced voting. I have given everyone a flyer that was provided by Fulton County related to questions. It's a actual voter guide, and I added an insert for the Cobb County residents as well.
Why did you do that?
We don't want to exclude
Because I called you and asked you to do it. I want to get a shout out, but that's all right, that's all right, that's all right. You missed it.
You and Ms. I brought it to my attention. But, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to make sure that you had the information. In addition to that, on election day, although it is not required, the municipal clerk's office will still have a phone line that either yourself or constituents can call in, and we'll assist them on their voting location or any problems or issues they may have. And typically what we do is we coordinate that with Fulton County Office of Registration and Elections, as well as the Cobb County Office of Registration and Elections, and we escalate the issues that you may have in any of your polls. We deal directly with the elections chief and the executive director of both boards to assist you. And typically on gubernatorial elections as well as presidential elections, obviously the voter turnout is higher, so there's a little bit more confusion with individuals that perhaps hadn't voted for a while.
What's that number that people can call?
404-330-6500. And we'll have staff here as early as 6:30 in the morning and as late as 7:30 in the afternoon.
Good.
So the number is, because they do call, I got one last year, Forrest, you went out there, working with me on mine, because they do call, so 404-330-6500.
And I will make sure you get that information electronically. And the last issue that I had to speak on was, last report rather,
Wait a minute, Ms. Shepherd.
There's a security issue with the egress when you leave the Suite 2700, which is the clerk's office, and go into the council chambers. Right now, we're trying to get an assessment to see if we can get a darker shaded window shading or actual blinds, so that as the council members go back and forth, you're not intercepted or you're not at risk for being hurt or harmed. And OAM is assisting us with that.
Well, you don't want to stay harmed, obviously, just around.
Trust me, we'll be the first one. We'll let you know. You're in harm's way.
Also, executive protection will be sweeping the committee rooms and the council chambers before and after each meeting. I believe it came up earlier with Ms. Shepherd. And also, I'll be getting with you all.
Bomb threats and all that thing.
Correct. Correct. Also, I'll be getting with you all.
Sweep, they're gonna do a sweep.
Right. After each and every committee meeting and council meeting. And also, I'll be getting with.
So when is this
Okay.
Correct.
It is legal now.
Okay, everybody, come on.
And also,
Anything else? One more thing.
Also, I'll be meeting with you all individually. The finance department has completed their true-up of your carry forwards. So I'll meet with you all individually between now
Say that
and
again, I
Monday.
didn't hear that.
Your carry forward.
What about it?
The finance department has completed their true-up of.
Oh, okay,
of
with the
line-
numbers
yeah,
and everything.
Yeah, so there'll be legislation for that on Monday.
Okay.
But I'll meet with you all individually just to let you all know what your carry forward numbers are.
Okay.
And also, Madam President, since we're a little bit ahead of schedule.
Not too much, but go ahead.
Of personal privilege. I just wanted to thank each and every council member for your vote of confidence in the confirmation process. I really appreciate it. And not just that, I appreciate the way that each council member has always interacted with me, especially the freshman council members, the way that you've come on board and the respect that you show me, and not just me, but the respect that you show the staff. I really appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. And you'll see more and more ramped up work that we do, and you'll see more of a presence by our office when it comes to a website and the services that we provide in a transparent fashion, which is indicative of the work that you do. So thank you.
Okay, you done?
Yeah, we have a working lunch at noon. The CEO of the food bank, Kyle Wade, will be here as well. Just come meet.
So we need everybody to go where to take this picture before you, okay, wait a minute, hold on, Mr. Dickens.
Mr. Payson, I was talking, is this a good time to talk about what we were talking about with the census and how the council has a role?
Sure. So the 2020 census is coming up. I don't know if there are any resources or anything that the council would like to allocate for education of the census. I don't know if you all know, but the federal funding for paper applications, a lot of people will actually be filing online their census application. So because the census is coming up for the FY20 budget, I don't know if there are any funding or anything that the council would like to allocate as far as educating their constituents, additional equipment.
That needs to
Because
be
federal
funding is tied
to how many of our residents.
So if y'all will wait till the CDHS report, we were gonna talk about something.
Okay, so let's do that later. Mr. Hillis. Hold on, Mr. Hillis.
So the census happens in 2020.
Correct.
The district reallocation,
Redistricting would
reapportionment
be-
doesn't happen until after the next election?
It'll be 2021, the following year.
Well, before November or no?
No, we would have it figured out by the next election. In
Right,
2020,
Yes, we
we'd
do
be
it.
figuring out.
And that is not a fun process, so
It
get
is very
ready.
fun.
We'll start that work in 2021.
But you have to live in a district for a year before you can run for office.
That's correct.
And the census
But we will
not be
start the
done.
work in 2021.
And we've always done it so that you have that time frame